Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? All right, members, we are on the home stretch here. The bill order for the next several bills, we're going to start with House Bill 471, followed by House Bill 270, followed by House Bill 138, and then followed by Senate Bill 80. And I will give you an update after that. So, member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration off the notice calendar House Bill 471, which is an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to take up off the notice calendar for immediate consideration H 471.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up House Bill 471 for immediate consideration. House Bill 471 is an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws. The bill passed the Senate with a proposal of amendment that is printed in today's notice calendar. The pending question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Member from Georgia. Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, your Ways and Means Committee's annual housekeeping bill, technical and administrative changes to our tax law, H 471, has returned from the other body with much agreement and a few additions. All of the additions and changes were either de minimis with regard to revenues to the state or an extension of an existing cost to the state. So there is no new cost to the state in the context of this bill. I will take you through the changes. I'm going to skip the parts of the bill that we have already heard about and voted on. So a new section 7 was added. Perhaps you would remember, Madam Speaker, that in a few of our recent charter changes with regards to the local option tax, the reporters of the bills have spoken about, because of our zip codes, a few of the edges of local option tax districts are sometimes confusing for retailers or those collecting the local option tax. And this is something that the Department of Taxes is doing their darndest to fix, but it is not quite fixable because Vermont towns, often multiple towns include one zip code, or zip codes don't cover town boundaries very accurately. And so this bill includes an addition of a report from the Department of Taxes to explore how we could better communicate with retailers in those communities and the folks who purchase things from those businesses when they might be overcharged or charged by accident because they are not actually in a local option tax district but thought they were. And then the next addition here is a provision that I believe we have spoken about twice today even, which is a sales tax exemption for advanced wood boilers. It moves the sunset out 1 year. And then sections 9, 10, and 11 are unchanged. Section 12 is unchanged. Sections 13 and 14 are unchanged. And then, Madam Speaker, we come to some changes to the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit that extends the ability for Vermonters who do not have Social Security numbers to claim either the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit without a tax ID number. It's to set up a process to assist them in filing for those tax credits, the Vermont level tax credits. And then sections 19 and 20 were unchanged. Doing that funny thing with the staples again. Aha. Excuse me. And then we come to some sections that are changes to the Vermont Bond Bank statute because of recent revenue monies available from the IIJA federal money. The bond bank is interested in being able to access those funds and so needs just a few slight changes to statute in order to comply with the federal rules. And it changes basically throughout bond bank statute the name of the bank from the municipal bond bank to the Vermont Bond Bank in order to access those federal funds. And then in section 32, we are looking at a report from our joint fiscal office on financing public infrastructure improvements. We have a number of places throughout our budget and throughout federal dollars that we invest in infrastructure, but we want to make sure that communities have ways of accessing those globally rather than in sort of bits and pieces. And then, Madam Speaker, the next few sections are all related to tax increment financing districts, and this body has voted on those sections already. However, at that time, they were living in S94, and now they are in H471. So it clarifies the definition of improvements and debt service payments, and the definition requires that original taxable value is used, and addresses how to handle decrement and tax increment financing. And then it extends, it clarifies that TIF should understand its increment to calculate its increment based on the appraised value rather than any tax stabilization agreements that might be in place, and extends the authority to retain increment on the Barre and the Hartford, on the Barre district, and then the ability to incur indebtedness on the Hartford district on request of those two districts. Again, that was already in a different bill that we have passed this year, and extends the sunset for the Vermont Economic Progress Council to approve applications for the Vermont Employment Growth Incentive out 1 year so our Committee on Commerce can continue to explore the best possible way to do economic development work. And then, Madam Speaker, we have a series of new sections from 40 to 43 that we actually just voted on in H217. So I'm going to spare the body those sections that we have already heard about and experienced today. And that brings me, Madam Speaker, to the effective dates. Your Committee on Ways and Means has voted to concur with the Senate proposals of amendment on a vote of 12-0-0, and we ask for your support.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have concurred in the Senate proposal of amendment. Next, member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration off the notice calendar House Bill 270, which is an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the adult use and medical cannabis programs?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules in order to take up off the notice calendar for immediate consideration H270.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up House Bill 270 for immediate consideration. House Bill 270 is an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the adult use and medical cannabis programs. The bill passed the Senate with a proposal of amendment that is printed in today's notice calendar. The pending question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Member from St. Albans City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. H270 is an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the adult use and medical cannabis programs. You can find the Senate's proposal of amendment starting on page 3902 of today's calendar. This bill is meant to address issues that the Cannabis Control Board identified with policies that will help fine-tune the regulation of the nascent retail market and the medical cannabis program. The Senate agreed largely with many of the proposals that we had sent over to them and recommended a number of changes in their strike-all amendment. Sections 1 and 2 are largely unchanged. The Senate added a new section 3, which is a technical amendment to help the Cannabis Regulation Fund better reflect all the chapters that are relevant to the fund. Section 4 added a new definition for propagation cultivator, and that's unchanged. Section 5 is a new section which clarifies the regulatory powers of local municipalities with regard to licensed cannabis operations. It explicitly states that municipalities cannot use their nuisance ordinances to prevent licensed outdoor cultivators from growing cannabis or use setback requirements or zoning bylaws to effectively prohibit the operation of an otherwise authorized and compliant cannabis establishment. This isn't a policy change, but it provides clarity. Section 6 is a new section that was added to expand the treatment of all outdoor cultivators in Vermont as agriculture for the purposes of current use, the use value appraisal program, nuisance ordinances, and other regulations that would otherwise apply to legal types of farming. Section 7 updates the Cannabis Control Board's rulemaking authority to cover the new propagation cultivator license type. Section 8 adds the new propagation cultivator to the list of license types. Section 9 replaces language in existing statute related to the confidentiality of licensee documents and disciplinary proceedings. Section 10 and 11 are unchanged. Section 12 is new language clarifying that the new propagator licenses shall be made available July 1st of 2024 to give time for the Cannabis Control Board to make rules for the new license type. Sections 13 through 16 are unchanged. Section 17 has a small change to clarify that Medicaid funds can't be used to support medical use cannabis caregivers. This is not a policy change, but it was clarifying language that was requested by Dale. Also in Section 17, the Senate reduced the number of years that a medical cannabis registry card would be valid from the 5 years that was in the House passed proposal to 3 years. The current medical use registry, the cards have to be renewed every year. Section 18 and 19 are new language allowing for the disclosure of abuse and neglect records to the board as part of their review of caregiver applications. No change to Section 20. Section 21 is a new reporting requirement for the Cannabis Control Board, along with relevant stakeholders about the state and various aspects of the medical use program, recognizing that the new adult use program has resulted in major changes to the marketplace that impact the medical use program's viability. Sections 22 and 23 are a more thorough approach than we had sent over to the decoupling of tobacco sales from cannabis paraphernalia, and affirm that the intent of the General Assembly was to have cannabis licenses, fees, and taxes apply exclusively to the smoking equipment that could also be used for cannabis or tobacco if they're being sold at cannabis-only retailers. Under current law, some cannabis retailers have to get a tobacco license to sell these kinds of smoking devices, and this is the unintended effect of encouraging those cannabis retailers to sell tobacco as well. These sections resolve that issue. Section 24 reflects internal transfers from the Cannabis Regulation Fund to the Cannabis Business Development Fund and to ACCD for technical assistance and equity grants. These are internal transfers and do not reflect any new spending. Section 24A asks the racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system advisory panel to report back on the harm created by the criminalization of cannabis and recommend how best to use the Cannabis Business Development Fund to address these harms and support those impacted. Section 25 is the effective date, which is still on passage. We heard from Legislative Counsel, the Joint Fiscal Office, the Executive Director of the Cannabis Control Board, and the Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. On a straw poll vote of 8-4, we recommend that the body concur with the Senate proposal of amendment to H270 and ask the body to vote yes.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, your House Ways and Means Committee enjoyed our joint hearing with your House Government Operations Committee, and on a vote of 12-0-0 voted to concur.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Member from Middlebury.
Madam Speaker, during the dinner break, the House Appropriations Committee took up this bill also because of Section 24, where there's the transfer and appropriation. As was mentioned previously, this is a two-step process, transferring money from one special fund to another in order to give money to social equity applicants, loans and grants to help them, which is part of the whole original setup of the Cannabis Control Board and the whole program. And on a vote of 11-0-1, the House Appropriations Committee supports this as well. Thank you.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have concurred in the Senate proposal of amendment. Just an update for members. Up next is 138, followed by S80, followed by H517. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration off the notice calendar? Nope, let me try this again. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration pending its entry on the notice calendar? I am jumping around. Sorry, members, hang on one sec. All right. Okay. We're going to try this one more time. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration off the notice calendar Senate Bill 138, which is an act relating to school safety?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to take up off the notice calendar for immediate consideration S138.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up for immediate consideration Senate Bill 138 for immediate consideration. There we go. Senate Bill 138 is an act relating to school safety. The bill passed the Senate with a proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment that is printed in today's notice calendar. The pending question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment? Member from Cornwall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. S138 left this body mere days ago. It returns unchanged from the work that left here, but with one addition. The Senate has added under Section 5A, the Working Group on Student Protections from Harassment and Discrimination in Schools. This working group consists of many members, but none of whom will require per diems, and so there is no appropriation in this. The working group shall study the current protections for students against harassment and discrimination in schools and make recommendations for legislative action to ensure students have the appropriate protections from harassment and discrimination. Madam Speaker, this working group will actually assist your House Committee on Education in its work in January as it tackles the same topic. Therefore, the House Education Committee took a straw poll and voted 10-0-2 to recommend the House concur with the Senate proposal of amendment to S138. Thank you.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have concurred in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to message our action on Senate Bill 138 to the Senate forthwith and to deliver the bill to the governor forthwith?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to message our actions on S138 to the Senate and to the governor forthwith.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to message our action on Senate Bill 138 to the Senate forthwith and to deliver the bill to the governor forthwith. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration pending its entry on the notice calendar, Senate Bill 80, which is an act relating to miscellaneous environmental conservation subjects?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to take up S80 for immediate consideration pending entry on the notice calendar.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up Senate Bill 80 for immediate consideration. Senate Bill 80 is an act relating to miscellaneous environmental conservation subjects. The bill was referred to the Committee on Environment and Energy, which recommends that the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill. The first assistant clerk emailed this committee report to members at 7:13 p.m. and is also posted on the House Overview webpage. The member from Randolph, Representative Sapowitz, will speak for the committee. In affecting the revenue of the state, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment recommended by the Committee on Environment and Energy. The member from Thetford, Representative Maslin, will speak for the committee. And then carrying an appropriation, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which also recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with the proposal of amendment recommended by the Committee on Environment and Energy. The member from Underhill, Representative Squirrel, will speak for that committee. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S80, an act relating to miscellaneous environmental conservation subjects.
Member from Randolph.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to present S80, an act relating to miscellaneous environmental subjects. The Environment and Energy Committee incorporated 3 instances of amendment to the original Senate bill. You may find the bill in your email. Sections 1 and 2 amend Act 161. Act 161 required the Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, to implement the dam safety program, including completing a dam registration program and reporting to the legislature regarding the program. The workload for the program has been high. The program missed the January 2022 deadline for the report. DEC is asking to postpone submission of the dam registration report until January of 2025. Act 161 also required DEC to adopt 2 sets of rules for the dam safety program. One set of rules was for dam registration and inspection, and they have been adopted. The second set of rules is for dam design standards. Because of program workload, DEC is seeking to postpone the deadline to adopt the dam design standards from July of 2022 to July of 2024. Section 3 changes the cross-reference to the definition of public waters in the Shoreland Encroachment Permit Program. The previously cross-referenced definition has become obsolete, and the proposed cross-reference is the current relevant definition of public water. Section 4 concerns salvage yards. Unlicensed salvage yards are a statewide problem. When the Agency of Natural Resources shuts one down, it can be difficult to remove vehicles because the yard is not authorized to operate a vehicle crusher. Section 4 allows an unlicensed salvage yard to operate a mobile salvage vehicle crusher with a liquids collection system for the purpose of closing the salvage yard. Sections 5 and 6 concern water quality financing and the state revolving loan funds. The state receives funding from US EPA for clean water funding and for safe drinking water funding. The state also has its own revolving loan funds. With recent efforts to improve state water quality, the state revolving loan funds are lacking monies. Sections 5 and 6 allow for some federal EPA revolving loan funds to be transferred to state revolving loan funds. Section 7 concerns the ANR report on the Riparian Protection Program. This amendment removes a section from the Senate-passed bill that is also included in the House and Senate versions of the Capitol bill relating to removing the sunset of a program to fund private clean water projects. The House and Senate Capitol bill versions of the language differed at the time this amendment was written, and we determined that the language should be reconciled in the Capitol bill and not here. The House Environment and Energy Amendment replaces the old Section 7 with a required report from ANR that shall address what elements of a riparian protection program should be implemented to protect water quality and aquatic habitat, and what funding would be required to implement a riparian protection program. Section 8 shifts the ANR report on stormwater treatment practices in the Lake Champlain watershed from a report on the previous calendar year to a report on the previous fiscal year. Section 9 concerns the Clean Water Service Provider Grant Program. The legislature required ANR to report back in January 2023 on the administration of the program, and this section delays the report until January 2024. Section 10, the legislature required ANR to report back in 2022 with recommendations on implementing a market-based mechanism for the trading of water quality credits. The ANR requests that the report date be delayed until July 1, 2024. Sections 11 through 13 remove specific monetary penalties in the beverage container redemption system, the single-use plastics, and the salvage yard programs, and replaces the specific penalties with cross-references to the agency's default enforcement authority. Section 14 will repeal the authority for ANR to deny a person a solid waste hauler permit for failing a criminal background check. Section 15 provides that an ANR construction general permit issued for emergency construction purposes will be issued according to the public notice requirements for emergency permits. Section 16 clarifies that a shoreland encroachment permit is effective on the date of issuance. Section 17 removes the requirement to post failed potable water supplies on the ANR website, as it duplicates a requirement to post this information in the land records. Section 18 makes multiple small changes to grants authorized from the Petroleum Cleanup Fund. The one significant change will authorize grants from the fund to be used for the replacement of a heating fuel system with an advanced wood heat system or heat pump. And Section 19 establishes an effective date of July 1, 2023. The committee heard testimony from Deputy Chief Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel, Director of Government Affairs, Meadow Hill Consulting, Policy and Water Program Director, Vermont Natural Resources Council, Secretary, Agency of Natural Resources, Associate General Counsel, Agency of Natural Resources, and the original sponsor of the amendment. The bill passed out of committee on a 10-0-1 vote. Your Committee on Environment and Energy respectfully requests your support of the bill.
And now, member from Thetford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Ways and Means as is our responsibility, went through the financial aspects of this bill and found at the end of the day that the impact on the revenues of the state is de minimis. But beyond that, Madam Speaker, our Ways and Means Committee paid particular attention to the issue of transferring funds from one federal fund to a state fund. in order to replenish that fund. And what's of concern to us is we know, as many members here who have tracked a fee bill for the last 7, 8 years, there has been no fee bill. And that is why that the Petroleum Cleanup Fund was running short, to use contemporary language, and need to be replenished, recapitalized through this transfer of federal money to state money. And so we're quite concerned about that, and we were glad to see the provision in the bill that requires that this sort of funds transfer can only happen for 1 year. Then ANR needs to provide reports on the status of the fees in these funds so that we can be assured that funds are being spent appropriately, taken from appropriate sources, and we are not jeopardizing the general fund, which is where we end up backfilling when other things go south. So on that, Madam Speaker, we heard from the member who presented the bill. We heard from a sponsor from Corrections and Institutions. We heard from Deputy Counsel, Legislative Counsel of Financial Analysts from JFO. And on a vote of 11-01, Madam Speaker, we urge the members to concur with the bill, support the bill as been presented. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
And now for the Committee on Appropriations, member from Underhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Your House Appropriations Committee thanks House Environment and Energy for bringing us S80. There are 3 sections in S80 that your House Appropriations Committee reviewed that had some reference to appropriations, Section 5, Section 6A, and Section 18. None of these sections propose any appropriations. Your House Appropriations Committee voted favorably S80 as passed by the Senate and further amended by the House Committee on Environment and Energy on a vote of 12-0-0.
The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Environment and Energy? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have proposed to the Senate to amend the bill. Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and third reading is ordered. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to place Senate Bill 80 in all remaining stages of passage?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules in order to place S80 in all remaining stages of passage.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to place Senate Bill 80 in all remaining stages of passage. Please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S80, an act relating to miscellaneous environmental conservation subjects.
The question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed the bill in concurrence with proposal of amendment. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to message our action on Senate Bill 80 to the Senate forthwith?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules in order to message our action on S80 to the Senate forthwith.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to message our action on Senate Bill 80 to the Senate forthwith. Members, at this time, we're going to move to House Bill 517, followed by JRS 27, which is our adjournment resolution that is being emailed to you, and then our last bill, the budget. So with that, Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration, pending its entry on the notice calendar, House Bill 517, which is an act relating to the approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1.
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to take up H517 for immediate consideration pending entry on the notice calendar.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up House Bill 517 for immediate consideration. House Bill 517 is an act relating to approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1. The bill passed the Senate with a proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment that the first assistant clerk emailed to members at 3:48 this afternoon. This amendment is also posted on the House Overview webpage. The pending question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment? Member from St. Albans City.
Madam Speaker, the Senate proposal of amendment to H517 was emailed to members earlier today at 3:48 p.m. by the first assistant clerk. The subject matter of this important amendment is a little far afield from the charter language of H517 as we sent it over to the other body. The dissolution of the Duxbury Moortown Fire District Number 1 charter language reported by the member from Lowell remains in the Senate's bill. The new Section 1A in their proposal of amendment authorizes the Department of State's Attorney's Executive Committee to appoint deputy state's attorneys or direct the executive director to appoint. We heard from the department that there are several statewide deputies who must currently be sworn in by each state's attorney in each county where they would need to advance a case or enact in the duties of a deputy state's attorney. In the event that there was a vacancy created in a state's attorney's office, it could be quite useful to empower the state's attorney's executive committee to appoint deputies on a time-limited basis as needed to continue the work of prosecuting and advancing the interests of justice in each county. Your House Committee on Government Operations heard from Legislative Counsel and a deputy state's attorney from the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs this afternoon. This is a matter of urgent concern for the department, and your House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs recommends that we concur in the Senate proposal of amendment on a vote of 11-0-1, and we ask for your support.
The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have concurred in the Senate proposal of amendment to the House proposal of amendment. Members, we will now turn to our final adjournment resolution. JRS 27 is a joint resolution relating to adjournment. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
JRS 27, joint resolution relating to adjournment. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives adjourn their respective houses on the 12th or 13th of May 2023, they shall do so to reconvene on the 20th day of June 2023 at 10 o'clock in the forenoon.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution, and the question is, shall the House adopt the resolution in concurrence? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have adopted the resolution in concurrence. Member from Pulte, can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules to take up for immediate consideration, pending its entry on the notice calendar, House Bill 494, which is an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules to take up H494 for immediate consideration, pending entry on the notice calendar.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to take up House Bill 494 for immediate consideration. House Bill 494 is an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government. The bill was referred to the Committee of Conference on the disagreeing votes of the two chambers. The Conference Committee has met and considered the same and recommends that the House adopt its report, which members can find online in the Senate calendar addendums. The pending question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Vergennes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The members of the Committee of Conference on H494, the FY24 Budget Act, met and resolved the differences between the versions of the bill between the House and the Senate. On a vote of 6-0, the Committee of Conference came to an agreement along with a small technical adjustment related to an e-board action. You may find the final report on the legislative website and on our House Appropriations Committee webpage under the date of Thursday, May 11th, 2023. Additional helpful summary documents had been emailed to all House members, and hard copies have been provided on the pages table in the center of the chamber. Madam Speaker, our collective work matters. It affects the lives of every Vermonter. Citizens and our economy continue to emerge from a global pandemic that has seen 3 years of shifting change. This budget continues to prioritize the needs of our citizens, and at a time when they are struggling with several changes. Nothing as urgent as the current housing crisis, nutrition gap, childcare, and workforce. The web report that you have access to on a link is a very helpful tool that has the base budgets of agencies and includes the notes that help with identifying current and previous positions of the governor, the House and the Senate, and the Committee of Conference final landing positions. There is truly little change throughout state agencies in this year's base budgets, but where there are changes, they have been truly mostly technical or positive increases. The language sections has the one-time appropriations listed, and for your ease of viewing, there is a helpful spreadsheet that lists the one-time investments, and this document is organized by topic. The highlight summary sheet is just that, a one-page helpful reference. You have received links to, and hard copies have been printed to provide a one-page sheet of the many Medicaid rate increases. These increases are critically important to our healthcare system. One increase that is worth highlighting is for Assistive Community Care Services, the ACCS. This has a rate increase of 79% here. This and some of the other important increases came from or came about from a study that was requested in previous years. In the Medicaid increases, total investment is around $99 million. Positions across state government have been increased by the governor, the House, and the Senate. A helpful link was also a part of the email, and they are all captured within the language sections of the bill. I would like to highlight for you areas where the House and the Senate have come to agreement. Housing. With a total of over $211 million, or almost $250 million in the FY24 budget alone. There is $102 million in housing assistance for supports and services, and almost $120 million in brick and mortar building supports. In the Committee of Conference, there's language that was included along with flexible funding to assist with a statewide emergency response. Childcare. The budget holds the funding for the bill that we all just passed. Criminal justice system. This budget adds the needed staff positions to shore up the court system with a new Superior Court judge and 6 additional staff in the judiciary. It has increases for the Defender General's office and includes the $9.2 million for a youth inpatient residential facility. Emergency communications. There is a 12-page agreed upon dispatch plan that I am grateful for the work of the Government Operations Committee and several members of the Appropriations Committee that stuck with this issue and produced this path. Recovery housing is an area that at first had a difference of opinion with the Senate, and I am pleased to report that through conversations and information, the conference report now has additional base funding going forward. Workforce and education was an area that we did not always agree on with the Senate. However, in the end, the report now includes the needed funding for adult education and a request to review their needs and how in the future we can best address the funding of adult education across the state. This area was seen as a more important investment than the remote worker program that was zeroed out. Higher education. At first, the Senate position was not funding the Office of Engagement that has been incredibly successful at providing grants for up to $5,000 for students in Vermont colleges to stay in Vermont. We came to agreement on splitting the amounts between the Office of Engagement and the Upskills program that is also a successful program through UVM. Agriculture. The organic dairy farmers of Vermont will have a program to assist them, and I believe the funding for this program will be absorbed in a matter of days after it's passed. I am very pleased to have been able to preserve the work of the House Agriculture Committee by retaining the Small Farm Diversification Grant Program, although at a much lower amount, but it's a start. Working Lands, another extremely important program, has increases and one-time investments. Transportation. The DMV fees are now a part of this budget and provide much of the needed fiscal dollars going forward. I would like to thank, Madam Speaker, the standing committees for their continued work, and I cannot close without thanking the members of the House Appropriations Committee and our amazing staff. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The budget has now come full circle and is back for its final vote in the House. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Are you ready for the question? If so, member from Lincoln.
Madam Speaker, Friday, March 13th, 2020, we left the building after a week of dropping the policy we had been working on, and instead we created a flurry of COVID-19 protections and flexibilities for all aspects of state government and our healthcare system. May 11th, 2023, the federal public health emergency declaration ended. The administration knew this date was coming, had plenty of time to plan for emergency housing transition, but they didn't. We learned a lot during COVID, especially from where the pandemic shined a bright light on the service and assistance gaps in the things people in Vermont need to live day to day, like safe housing. In the beginning of the pandemic, we bonded together powerfully and creatively to care for each other, for businesses, hospitals, and more. Why did we lose that creativity, that strong drive to find solutions when facing this humanitarian crisis of pending mass unhousing? Why did the administration not plan ahead for this? We have the money. It is not a money problem, but a problem of political will and a disaster in the making. I agree that it is all of our jobs. I have a share of the blame in not following more closely, not being aware earlier on that this was happening. Still, we are the people with the power to fix the administration's lack of will to plan a humane and safe transition for more than 2,500 people. This cannot be left to the already overburdened shelters, hospitals, long-term care facilities, frontline service organizations, churches, temples, and volunteers. There is not enough capacity in any of these systems and workforces. For example, there are 125 patients waiting in hospitals across Vermont solely because there's no capacity in long-term care and other facilities. There is no room. This chamber has done good and substantial work, Madam Speaker, investing in mid and long-term housing. We have not done so with a safe and humane emergency housing transition. Madam Speaker, may I share some quotes?
You may.
From David, I am 68 years old. If not for this program, I wouldn't be alive. Another David, my insulin must be kept refrigerated for me to survive. I can't live outside. Richard, I'm a Vietnam veteran who is struggling to find permanent housing. If this program ends, I'd be forced to sleep in my truck. I'm worried it will be unsafe and that I'll end up dead. Amy, I have absolutely nowhere to go besides the streets. If that happens, my medical conditions such as PTSD, seizures from 2 brain surgeries, among other things, losing my housing would be a safety issue for me as it will cause a serious decline to all progress I have made. Jenna, being without housing is very dangerous for us. I'm a single female in recovery. I fear for my life and sobriety. Joseph, my wife is in the hospital. She just had brain surgery. Our medication requires refrigeration. William, I am homeless due to having a stroke. I'm now in a wheelchair. Without this program, my life's in jeopardy. Madam Speaker, many of us, including working people, are 1 or 2 paychecks away from losing housing. In addition, we are only weeks away from a looming default on the national debt, a catastrophe that will hit the poorest first. Since even before this housing crisis, I often think about my privilege and while driving will look around to assess where I might shelter if I had no home. It's a grim thought, but very real. Madam Speaker, may I have one last quote?
You may.
I'm remembering what Paul Wellstone so aptly said, we all do better when we all do better. I'm proud of the many great things our budget does. I, like you, helped build it, but I have no pride for this. I am not proud of this. It is not a small thing, and I will not be part of creating another public health emergency for people already struggling to survive. I will be voting no, and I commit to working to make it better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Are you ready for the question? Member from Burlington.
The senior member from Burlington. Madam Speaker, it's been said many times in many ways by many people that the true measure of a person is how we treat those from whom we have nothing to gain. May I quote President Jimmy Carter?
You may.
The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens. The budget before us abandons our most vulnerable Vermonters and threatens to create a humanitarian crisis that will undermine our collective recovery from the coronavirus pandemic emergency. When the pandemic struck, I witnessed the power of this body to rise to the occasion and to take swift action to protect the people of Vermont. And in 2 days, we shut down the state, people mobilized to take care of their neighbors, the healthcare system implemented new protocols, we rapidly deployed telehealth, and we ended homelessness as we knew it by providing housing for all using hotels. The original reason for these hotels was to enforce a quarantine as part of a public health emergency, an evidence-based public health intervention that not only controlled the spread of disease, but also had an additional benefit to public health. The provision of housing and shelter, and a social determinant of health, and inclusion, belonging, it created new communities of support and mutual aid despite continued social problems. But Madam Speaker, without planning for a proper transition, the mass eviction from the hotels is going to create a new public health emergency, affecting many social determinants of health besides housing, such as violence, structural conflict, and discrimination. Many of us witnessed the forced eviction of the residents from Sears Lane by the city of Burlington in 2021, and this illustrates the potential harm of this mass eviction on a smaller scale. And the approximately 1,800 households potentially displaced from the hotels will not have the same safety net offered by the government to the people of Sears Lane. This eviction could potentially fill more than 70 encampments around Vermont, the size of Sears Lane. Some people may find permanent and temporary housing, but many others will be sleeping in cars and parking lots, on the streets and in the woods. More people would move in and out of our hospitals and our prisons due to the impact of eviction on the social determinants of health and crime. Hundreds of people are facing abandonment, cast into the shadows after being treated as if they mattered and belonged. Traumatized by the loss of shelter and community due to another broken promise between the government and the people. And in terms of the financial cost, the estimated $150 million or more that we spent as a government on guaranteeing housing for all during the pandemic emergency might just go to waste because of the potential unintended social and economic costs that could increase exponentially over time. And these costs would likely exceed any savings and would yield no benefits. So instead of mass unsheltering, why don't we choose housing for all? Let's vote no on this conference committee report. Let's go back to the table and negotiate a new deal. We can appropriate the funding needed to guarantee shelter and peace of mind to the people in hotels for the next year as we build real bridges to housing. We could reinvest as much money as possible from current hotel expenses into housing for all. And I'll give you a few examples. We could renegotiate lower fees with the hotels, a reduction from the current $149 a month to $149 a day to $100 a day would save about $30 million a year that could be reinvested into permanent housing. We could purchase some hotels. For example, one hotel in Bennington is on the market for $2.7 million, but we pay $4.2 million a year to rent it. We could buy manufactured housing to fill some of the vacant lots in mobile home parks. We could identify state and municipal land near a few of the hotels and rapidly build permanent public housing, not only for unhoused people, but also for twice as many other people who want to move around or to move into Vermont for work, school, and retirement. We can incentivize private development in neighborhoods between the new housing and the hotels as part of a broader process of economic and social revitalization. I could go on, but I would like to just say that there's some other states we could look at who are doing a better job, like Project Turnkey in Oregon or Project Homekey in California. So at this moment in time, the General Assembly must make a choice between mass unsheltering or housing for all. And when we compare the costs versus benefits of this decision, to me, the choice is clear. So as we recover from this pandemic emergency, let Vermont build a future of social and economic opportunity for all by finally guaranteeing housing as a human right once and for all. So at this moment, my choice is to say no because I know that we can do better than this. Madam Speaker, may I end with a poem from one of the residents of Sears Lane that she wrote in October 2021 while the encampment was under siege and before people were fully displaced.
Okay.
Nobody. In the darkness is a little light that shines through. In the chaos, there is a strength that carries on. In the craziness within us, there is a hope and prayer that people will care and help. But realistically, nobody does or wants to because we are the forgotten and nobody.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, not infrequently over the past couple of weeks, a number of people, both here in the building and in my other world, have been asking me similar questions, and the qualitative research in me has grouped them into two themes, and it's really, have you enjoyed it, and what have you learned? And I've been answering that first question all along because everybody asks me, are you enjoying it? So it's just kind of morphed a little bit into have you enjoyed it? And very consistently, I've been answering that question with kind of the points of disillusionment I've had as I've done this for the first session. Realizing that bills that are a no-brainer to me, face significant opposition. I'm surprised a lot, disillusioned a lot. And I've had to adjust my barometer for being disappointed, and that's fine. I don't mind doing that. And I speak often about kind of the subtle difference between being disappointed and being the disappointment. So I'm always I try to stay reflective of why I'm disappointed. This right now, this moment is a profound disappointment for me, and adds to that disillusionment. I have learned also that I've known this, I didn't know it in this context necessarily, that I can certainly trust my intuition. And I'm disappointed in myself for not realizing that earlier, not remaining more critical, asking more deliberate questions when my intuition was pleading for me to do so. That's part of the learning curve. I'm fine with that. It'll show up again next session. Equity is about access. And my apologies to my committee, because I've said that a number of times. Equity is about access. And I have learned that access to this body is by no means equitable. I'm going to give you an example. So as we were going through our final review of the changes made to the capital bill by the Senate, I realized some things again that surprised me. I realized that even though an agency of jurisdiction didn't request money for the capital bill, and even though the administration, the governor, didn't request money on behalf of that agency within the capital bill, and that even though the House committee didn't receive a request for money within the capital bill, that the Senate can still return to the capital bill, to our office, to our committee, with additional money added for a previously unregarded program. So this means that somebody knows that they can bypass the processes we have in place for constructing a budget, in this case, the capital budget. They know that there is a room in this office or a room in this building or a person in this building that they can just go to and say, I'm going to need that money again. And it just kind of happens. And then I think about the news I received last night about a tenant of the emergency motel program who received a 24-hour eviction notice. And I wonder what that person would do if they had that access. If they knew they could just come to this building, find their person, go to that room and say, I'm going to need some money. That is inequality, that inequitable access to this building. Another thing I learned is that even when things initially seem to make sense to me, that they're not always as they seem. And I remember sitting in this seat, really, really new to the job, not really knowing yet what I got myself into. And we were listening to the governor's budget proposal. And he was talking to us about the current surplus and the one-time money that is really grandly available to us right now. And what a shame it would be if we didn't lock in the federal dollars that we could match with that money. And it made sense to me. And I remember sitting here thinking, I wonder if I'm going to have to convince people that that's a good idea. And then I learned that we have never parked this much cash into the Capitol bill. I learned that we have never parked any cash into the Capitol bill. And that we have never left federal dollars unmatched through the capital allocation process. And yet here we are with $14 million just sitting in the Capitol bill until 2025 on a manufactured scare tactic that we might suddenly start leaving federal money on the table 2 years from now. That money's not doing anything for 2 years, $14 million. It's not going to be matched until FY26 and FY27. I'm being generous when I call this a scheme. A scheme to make sure we don't spend current surplus dollars on today's needs that are so otherwise easily disregarded, such as our unhoused Vermonters. And then we're told that they'll be able to self-resolve their housing situation and that we need to move on. And we did not push back in any collective, meaningful way to those comments. And I will leave this session tonight or maybe tomorrow morning flabbergasted that did not become a flashpoint. When we heard that they'll be able to self-resolve their housing situation and that we need to move on. How did that just float there? This is callous and inhumane, and we have the means to provide a much smoother off-ramp. The crisis of the unhoused is a wound on this country, and that is especially true here in Vermont. It is a wound, and nobody disagrees with the fact that the emergency hotel program is a very small Band-Aid to that wound. But this budget is simply ripping off that Band-Aid while the wound is still trying to heal. And whatever healing might have begun is going to reverse itself. And that wound will become infected, and that infection will spread. This budget is deliberate and inhumane decision that disregards the most vulnerable Vermonters. Our work is not done, and I cannot support the budget in its current form.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The words we've heard are true. The situation we face is difficult. However, I rise in support of this budget because it continues investments that we have been making that are addressing many of the issues in front of us with respect to how are we going to house people who are suffering through poverty, through disability, through addiction, through homelessness. Over the last several years, well, before the COVID emergency, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all, because before the COVID emergency, we didn't know how much we didn't know about those experiencing homelessness. We didn't know as a body how deep the housing crisis is. Those of us who have served on the Housing Committee over the years have heard not just anecdotes, but statistics, reality, data. And when the COVID emergency came, we started receiving federal funding. This budget continues many of the investments that we started 3 years ago. Since March 2020, we've invested $398 million for affordable housing development. 4 years ago, we used to fight over $2 million. In housing assistance, we've allocated over $500 million of federal funds primarily for programming. And on one hand, we've realized that it's not enough. This year, we're going to invest over $16 million to increase shelter capacity. Shelters are not the first place we want to have people living for any length of time, and yet there we are, and we have to do it. We're investing over $1 million in recovery residences, things that we've been trying to do in this building for years. We've invested over $1 million to the Land Access and Opportunity Board to create housing, access to housing, which creates wealth for people of color or people of a certain demographic class. Something we fought for really hard last year, and we're sustaining the promise that we made then. Just to VHCB, between the BAA and the property transfer tax and one-time expenditures, we're allocating $99 million. And out of that $99 million, the money that they can use from their base has an investment factor of $7 or $8 or $10 for every dollar that we invest. So if $12 million from their base fee from the property transfer tax goes to housing investment, we're going to see over $100 million of housing built across the state. Then there's an extra one-time FY24 investment of $50 million, which will go to hotel investments, turning hotel rooms into micro units, having them where services are so that people don't need a car if they don't have one. We're reinvesting in the VHIP program, which is taking units that have been offline. And for the property owners that are taking these loans or grants, they'll be required to offer them first to people experiencing who are coming out of homelessness. And if they can't find a household who can fit into that category, it will go to somebody who is at 80% of the area median income. Now, area median income, that phrase is something we hide behind. We can call that poverty. And the people who are making 80 or 60 or 30% of AMI are amongst our most vulnerable Vermonters. And there's tens of thousands of them that we're trying to house. These investments won't do it alone, but keeping these investments going, investing money into mobile home parks, which is some of the most affordable housing that we have, to repair pads and infrastructure and roads, things that have been ignored. This is deferred maintenance that we've been fighting for years. And we're finally able to afford it in this way. Another $6 million left over from ARPA money that's going to help funds address septic, water, and energy needs of older housing stock owned and occupied by low-income Vermonters. This budget, while not perfect if we consider everything that we're facing when it comes to poverty alleviation in the state, still makes over $200 million of investments in helping the most vulnerable Vermonters. And while it's painful to think that we're going to have people who are going to be put closer to the edge than they already are, and we have at least spoken commitments from people in those divisions that we've been asking for a plan for the last 2 years. And when we took testimony in our committee last week, the pain that we experienced from our witnesses who are asked to provide those services in an overburdened and undercapacity way tells me that we're not a machine here. We're making these investments to make life better, but building will not happen in 2 months. Building will not happen in 2 years in some cases, but we are making these investments. And I'm proud of our Appropriations Committee for working on this since January, actually since November of last year, in anticipation to provide this much in funds, to provide the housing for the demographic, if you will, another cold word that we hide behind, for the people who need it most in this state. Are there other people who need it as well? Absolutely. We know that the middle class, first home buyers need assistance as well. And we weren't able to provide as much as we have in the years past, but we're going to focus on it. It's on a contingency list. But right now, the need is for helping people who are at the bottom of the economic spectrum. And this budget does that. So I would like to thank the Appropriations Committee for making hard choices, not all of them the best from our needs, but all of them the best that they could do with what they had to work with this year. And I thank them for their work.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Berry City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, every budget tells a story. Many of you know this. I suspect most of you know this, but it is a secret of a good grant writer that they start with the budget first, and then they dive into the narrative. This budget tells a powerful story. It tells a story about sending people to work, about training Vermonters in new and critical fields like teaching and nursing and restorative justice. It tells a story about, at levels never before seen in this state's history, feeding our neighbors and our children and bolstering our farmers who are growing the food to feed our neighbors. It tells a story about welcoming migrants and new Americans into our communities. It tells a story about caring for those older adults in those communities. It tells a story about assisting those who cannot now afford homes. And it tells a story about serving the unhoused too. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this budget. It is not immune from critique. No budget, no story ever is. I respect so greatly those of you who wish it could do more. I wish the administration had done more. But I will tell you this, if this budget is voted down tonight, the gears of our bureaucracy, of our government will slow, and then they will stop. Resources are diverted to developing contingency plans immediately in every single agency and department and town in this state. And those are resources needed by people in need, by people who are suffering. By voting down this budget now, we would halt our efforts for so many to damage even more. Madam Speaker, the work, the hundreds and hundreds of hours of work that were poured into this document, into these Excel spreadsheets, shines through. This budget does so much. It is systemic, it is thoughtful, and it reflects our values as a body and as Vermonters, and it is worthy of this assembly, and I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Member from Essex Junction.
Madam Speaker, with this budget, we are investing $99 million in our human services and healthcare systems through increases in provider and reimbursement rates and investing millions more in programs to help our most vulnerable. We're investing in emergency medical services, so they are still there when we call 911. We are investing in our dentists, so people have the opportunity to receive the care they need before they have to be sent to a hospital. We're investing in our home health providers so they can go to homes and care for people where they want to be cared for in a less expensive area. We are investing in our mental health providers, our primary care providers, our adult day services, nursing homes, and so much more. We're establishing a statewide mobile crisis response program and growing our Blueprint for Health program. All of these investments equate to increasing access to essential services for Vermonters in all stages of life and socioeconomic status. Our human services and healthcare systems are interconnected. When we invest in only one or two programs or one particular population, we miss the opportunity to help Vermonters or families who have varying needs. We miss the opportunity to support our workforce who work together across their fields to lift up all Vermonters. Madam Speaker, I am voting yes for a budget that makes wide and deep investments in Vermonters. I urge the body to support this budget. And I also remind members our work doesn't end tonight. And I encourage and urge all members to continue the hard work that's needed to lift up all Vermonters.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Montpelier.
Madam Speaker, I want to express appreciation to the conferees and our Appropriations Committee. I don't doubt their values. They work so hard on this, and there's so much in this budget I'd be proud to vote for. And that's why I'm sad that I'm just going to say the last 5 years before I got here, I was on City Council right here in Montpelier, and there was a spike in homelessness at the time, and we did the best we could. We had city hotel vouchers when people were cold. We appointed a homeless liaison position just to try to have a face to them. We had a social worker, and it wasn't enough. We begged the state, you got to give us more, or bad things are going to happen. And they did, We tried our best, but it wasn't enough. A lot of bad things happened. If you walk down the bike path right now, you'll see human waste sitting by the Winooski River. If you look a few weeks ago, just over at the transit center, a worker from Good Samaritan Haven was stabbed 10 times. We didn't do a good enough job protecting him. We had a makeshift warming shelter in the transit center, and we didn't do a good enough job for him. And we always asked for help, and it never came. We live in a town where the vacancy rate's less than 1%. We got a rec center. We could stick some cots in there. It's not ADA compliant. It's not going to do the job. The state of Vermont doesn't have a camping policy on their state grounds. So if somebody's camping in a parking lot or something, they would probably tell them to move elsewhere. We have a camping policy in Montpelier, but we don't have much city land in Montpelier, which makes it tough because people camp up in Hubbard Park. And even right now, we're up there handing out, volunteers are handing out tick spray because humans living in Hubbard Park are picking ticks off themselves. This is before the voucher program is expired. It's going to get worse. I don't know how to tell people it's going to get worse because it feels so bad already. And they're starting to do an inventory. They're talking about you know, this guy needs insulin. You know, we need refrigerators in town. Where are we going to stick the insulin? This person's on oxygen. We need an electrical outlet. Where are they going to camp, you know? And it just doesn't seem like we have much answers. And, you know, I don't know. I spent all week just talking to like service providers and, you know, the mayor, city manager, chief of police, and everybody told me the same thing. We're not ready. We need like a transition plan. We can't have, you know, 80 households with children coming out of Washington County in the next few weeks. We don't know what to do with them. You have to push pause because it's not enough. We need more time. We need a transition. I don't want to speak against this budget, Madam Speaker, but I know these people. I know a lot of these people. They're my friends. I was on the homelessness task force. I worked with them. And I saw some success stories when, you know, families who were living in cars actually got to the hotel and, you know, they had a bit of comfort just for a brief period of time. I don't know. It's, I think our job with state government is to help people. And I know we can't always do that. But if we can't help them, we shouldn't hurt them. And eliminating this voucher program hurts a lot of people. So unfortunately, I have to vote no.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you already know from my speech earlier, I worked for state government for many, many years. I used to work for the Office of Economic Opportunity, helping manage the Family Supportive Program, which helps families who experience chronic homelessness. And I care very deeply for the most vulnerable Vermonters, those who can't and don't have a home and a safe place to sleep. This crisis is about so much more than giving people a roof over their head. It's about access to supportive services, recovery housing, mental health services, substance use disorder, and so much more. This budget makes historic investments in a lot of these services: rental housing assistance, emergency housing, supportive services, and it will help DCF develop a long-term solution for Vermonters struggling to find and sustain permanent housing. I acknowledge that DCF leadership should have been working on a solid transition plan for our most vulnerable Vermonters for a long time. And I agree with a lot of what has been said here tonight. But I also have worked with the people and the professionals who are trying to put a plan together, and I have faith in the new leadership at DCF. And I know that they are finally taking this seriously. I believe that their all-hands-on-deck approach will lead to long-term solutions for vulnerable Vermonters who are not currently housed. I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Member from Vergennes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that it's late and we all would like to go home, but I would really like to ask that when this vote is taken, it would be taken by roll.
The member from Vergennes requests that when the vote is taken, it be taken by roll. Is the member sustained? The member is sustained. When the vote is taken, it will be taken by roll. Member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, may I inquire of the reporter of section C102?
The member from Vergennes is interrogated.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, did the Committee of Conference discuss or review the housing transition proposal with community action agencies or emergency shelter staff? And I should say the housing transition proposal in the budget.
I think you're referring to the amendment that the Committee of Conference brought forward on that Thursday. It was one of the last items that was introduced because we wanted to have as long a period as possible to working on what we could do and achieve. And with the help of members from the Human Services Committee and in the Senate and in Appropriations, We worked late on this to bring forward the language that you see in the budget there.
Okay. And then as a follow-up question, did the Committee of Conference discuss or review the $25 million proposal that was submitted by the Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness and endorsed by Champlain Housing Trust and the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition?
I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that your committee of conference and others, as we prepared what we could for this, has been in an incredible communication with very, very many entities across the state and in state government and in the administration.
Okay. I thank the member. Madam Speaker, just one moment. iPad's getting tired. Madam Speaker, housing is a human right. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, a multilateral treaty adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1966. The United States has not yet ratified our participation in this treaty, which would require the United States Senate to vote by a 2/3 majority to approve treaties when negotiated by the executive branch. 20 years later, in 1997, a specific element of the right to adequate housing was further developed in a general comment on forced eviction by the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The commentary on forced eviction by a special rapporteur for the UN Human Rights Council, which can be found on their website, reads as follows. Forced evictions constitute gross violations of a range of internationally recognized human rights, including the human rights to adequate housing, food, water, health, education, work, security of the person, freedom from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, and freedom of movement. Forced evictions are often linked to the absence of legally secure tenure, which constitutes an essential element of the right to adequate housing. And I'll note that those who are currently in hotels are guests. That's their legal status. Forced evictions share many consequences similar to those resulting from arbitrary displacement, including population transfer, mass expulsions, mass exodus, ethnic cleansing, and other practices involving the coerced and involuntary displacement of people from their lands and communities. Forced evictions can broadly be defined as the permanent or temporary removal against their will of individuals, families, and/or communities from the homes and/or land which they occupy without the provision of and access to appropriate forms of legal or other protection. As a result of forced evictions, people are often left homeless and destitute without means of earning livelihood and often with no effective access to legal or other remedies. Forced evictions intensify inequality, social conflict, segregation, and invariably affect the poorest, most socially and economically vulnerable and marginalized sectors of society, especially women, children, minorities, and Indigenous peoples. Madam Speaker, I am proud of the budget that we have worked on together this year and recognize how significant the investments are that we are making in this budget. I express my sincere gratitude to our tireless Committee on Appropriations and our conferees. Nevertheless, I believe that a $25 million oversight was made, what would have amounted to 0.3% of the budget, and that this relatively small amount of money would have prevented the forced unsheltered homelessness of nearly 3,000 Vermonters. Given what is missing from H494, a guarantee that no Vermonter will be forced into unsheltered homelessness, I cannot in good conscience vote yes.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Castleton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't have a written speech here for everybody tonight, but the one thing I have to say is that we've had a very long day, and many of us are sitting here tired, thinking about the long drive home, and then when we finally get home, maybe get a glass of water, lie down in bed, and go to sleep and wake up, start our next day. Well, as this budget is right now, there are people right now that do not have the luxuries that we have, that we're sitting here nodding off, that we're tired, but we're sheltered, we're clothed, we're paid, and we have the option to go home after this. These people that are being left out of this budget do not have the option to go home. They have no bed to go home to. They are outside many times having to fight for their lives, figure out where their next meal is going to be, being undertreated for substance use disorder, undertreated for mental health conditions. And the fact that we've passed everything else so far this session, and the one thing that we're completely neglecting on is the basic fundamentality of our humanity. And I commute back and forth to this building 4 times a week, hour and 35 minutes, 166 miles round trip every day. And every day when I drive through Rutland, I see people that need help, because there are people in this state that need help. And unless we do something about it now, we're just going to keep ignoring the problem. Maybe we'll do it next fiscal budget year or whatever. But saying this as not just a freshman legislator, but as a human being, we need to take steps to address this now. And whether that is having the government actually address the budget, whether we take initiative ourselves as legislators, as citizens of the state, to engage in voluntary activities to help people, something has to be done, because I can't in good conscience sit back and not do anything about this. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm still a fairly new member to this body, and so I took a moment to look at our joint rules of the House and Senate as adopted for this biennium, because I think there's an important clarification to be made about the process related to a budget conferee report. In Rule 21, do I have to ask, may I read Rule 21?
You may.
Thank you. In Rule 21, if either House shall reject the report of a committee of conference, or if the committee shall fail to agree, either House may thereupon ask for another committee of conference. I would like to just clarify that, because a member in this debate, I believe, had incorrect information about what happens. Government is not going to shut down if we vote down the budget conferee report today. We can renegotiate a piece of the budget with the Senate. We have time. We have next week. We have until July 1st. So I truly believe we have a clear question before us today, and we can use our rules and the time that we have. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Northfield.
Madam Speaker, I wanted to wait and not disrupt, I think, a very important part of the discussion tonight. But I do want to step back and talk a bit on a broader level about the budget that's before us. And I think we all know that no budget meets what everyone wants unless we write it as a committee of one. And I didn't like some of the priorities that were in the budget that came to us originally. Generally, if the good outweighs the bad, we vote for it. But I think we have to remember that even if almost everything is good, we also have to be able to afford it. I want an awful lot more than what's in this budget. We've been talking about two crises tonight. We spent a lot of time talking about a very true, real crisis in childcare, and now we're talking about a very real, imminent crisis with people who are unsheltered. But we have multiple crises in this state. We know we have a housing crisis, both with low-income housing, but also middle income, to bring in the workforce that we need, that's critical to maintain our economy and our revenues. I want more to be done in responding to climate change. I want increases, expansions in our public support of childcare, which, as has been pointed out so well, also ties so much to our workforce crisis. I want family and medical leave, paid leave. I also want ongoing commitments funded first before anything new or else that at least meet inflation, because otherwise we're actually making cuts to our safety net. That's why I supported the asks from the Human Services Committee for budget increases in things that had been level funded. I do want to ensure that we don't leave federal money on the table by not having money prepared and set aside for what we do know is coming. I want us to be addressing healthcare access. That was once our #1 priority and crisis. Healthcare is a human right, and yet huge numbers in our state remain so significantly underinsured that they can't access healthcare. And we're facing another year yet in a row where our private insurers have announced double-digit increases in insurance rates. I want to alleviate tax burdens where people are going to be paying 7.2% higher in the ed fund and their property taxes. I want to be able to exempt military retiree pensions and Social Security like so many other states managed to do, so that they support their retirees who so they can continue to live here. And I don't want people who face homelessness now or imminently to pay the price for our failure to plan ahead. That's an issue close to me. I spent the first 10 years of my career overnights on the streets of New York City, crawling in the steam tunnels under Grand Central Station, bringing sandwiches to homeless teenagers. This year, it seems that despite increasing taxes and fees, the needs that surround us far exceed even what this budget is doing. Some of those, many of those are from external pressures, but they're also ones we created by building reliance and becoming accustomed to what was being funded with COVID money. We knew that would come back to bite us, and it has. The motel program is just the most obvious one. Taking something away is always harder than not starting it. So the big question in front of us is what happens next year? A budget can't be looked on as a single year project in time. What happens next year when it's likely that our revenues are on the decline? The majority of the members in this body currently were not here the last time that we were forced to cut a budget, not level fund it, actually cut a budget. Most have only seen times of increases, and including most recently, the incredible increases in federal money for COVID. So we're both staring the eyes of levels of overwhelming needs across many, many areas, but also facing some of the highest taxes in the country and spending more per person than most other states in the country, despite actually being subsidized by other states for our spending, because we get back more from the federal government than all of us pay in. in our federal taxes. We don't have line item voting available, either adding or subtracting from the budget. We can't even take just a few items out or move it to balance what we want to see. It is all or nothing. And if all is too far out of control, then that option can only end up being a no, because it is out of control and unsustainable. There's a lot to look to before getting to that point in a decision. I have several questions to ask with some concerns over some of the policy that seems to be reflected in this budget. Several items where I think there are structural problems as illustrations, but also want to speak to some of the really good things that are embedded in it, thanks to the work of the Committee of Conference, and I think they should be noted and appreciated. But Madam Speaker, if I could interrogate the presenter of the bill.
The member from Virgins is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, I always have concerns when there are parts of the budget that seem to be more a freestanding policy statement that is not tied to explaining a budget, because it means we can't debate the issue like we would if it was in a bill. So I really wanted to ask questions about several of that type of item. And first of all, I've been trying to understand, it begins, I think, on page 71 in the Senate calendar version, this newly evolving cash fund for capital expenses. It didn't start this year, but we're fleshing it out more this year. We're putting more of it into statute. It seems to be a relatively new concept. What I don't understand is why we are creating it as a subcategory of the appropriations bill, rather than having a unified capital bill for things that are defined as capital expenditures. And I recognize that the capital bill is usually bonded money, and we're looking at general fund in this cash fund, but it seems to understand our overall capital expenditures. I'm just trying to understand that as a component of this budget.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the question and the opportunity to discuss something that is, like you are accurate, that it is relatively new. The cash fund was something that was created in last year's budget and opportunity. But I might say that, without going too far into it, that the goal of the cash is on a pay-as-you-go level. This is to relieve the pressure off of the state bonding. This is where the budget now historically has never been as tied to the capital bill as it is this year. We're very much now entwined with this relationship going forward because of the fiscal responsibility of actually paying for projects with cash as you go instead of incurring more debt. Right now, within the budget, the state of Vermont pays every year at about $80 million in our debt for our bonding. And if we have some excess cash, it is much better to actually pay for projects with cash than with bonded dollars. And especially in this environment today where interest rates are so high.
Thank you. That is very helpful. A second question I had, Madam Speaker, is I noticed in going through parts of the budget, there were pieces that talked about sort of contingent funds, that this will get funded if there's additional revenue. And that made me concerned about prior commitment that said anything that we had that was additional money, additional revenue available was going to go, or at least a certain percentage, as I recall, was always going to be going towards paying down more of our pension liabilities. Is this contingent money that's being diverted away from that commitment?
Thank you, Member That construct at the end of the fiscal year still exists, but this new sub-cash fund is relatively new, and we really want to make sure that if we have extra funds at the end of the year, that there's a list that is provided that we would like to have funded in the order that they appear. This would be within, let's see. We've created two new accounts. There's the actual sub-account that is used for the capital fund that's for bonding, and there's a sub-account that we put the cash fund in to pay for projects on a cash fund basis. So if there is surpluses and the ability to put money in that cash fund, it is a smarter place to put that. It does not take away some of our pension funding is fully funded. As a matter of fact, we put in this year an additional payment of $9 million, and we'll put in an additional next year of 12. And our intent is in the year after that, 15, to honor our commitment to the pension fund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's very good to know and to be reassured about. I had a question also about a part related to healthcare language that was new terminology to me. It sounded like a significant policy directive to the Agency of Human Services, maybe a change from our all-payer system, reference to a hospital-directed payment plan that AHS is supposed to negotiate with the Center for Medicaid and Medicare. It's on page 119, E3031, and I'm wondering, where that came from, and if that wasn't a policy direction that ought to have been a bill or be in a bill rather than a component, buried in the budget.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I really do enjoy the fact that you are so astute and really pay attention to all the details. I believe you're referring to E301.3, the Global Commitment Fund and Hospital Directed Payment Program?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, it is actually something that came to light when we were in the midst of our committee of conference. That news came about that, and had some notes. The Agency of Human Services is pursuing a opportunity with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, a CMS, known as the Hospital Directed Payment Program. Okay, so this is, in a nutshell, is going to be extremely good news to Vermont, and it came very late in the process during the committee of conference. Okay, if we achieve this payment, or I should say, at the University of Vermont Medical Center, would be eligible for receiving this funding. The recipient of it, which would be UVM Medical Center, would no longer be eligible for what is called the disproportionate share, the DISH payment that we provide. And if that happens and they are no longer eligible, the payment that currently goes to UVM Medical Center would now be distributed among all the other hospitals in Vermont. This is something that is in the process. We needed this language to make sure that those payments were directed in that way, that we were taking care of and assuring our healthcare system. And I'm trying to think of if it's an exact number, but it's a significant amount of money that would go out to all of the other hospitals.
So, Madam Speaker, is what you're describing that the UVM network would be held whole through this special program, and thereby the other funds would be able to be spread, more of them around the other hospitals? Is that the concept?
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I am, with your permission, because your House Healthcare Committee took more testimony on this, and I would love to yield to the chair of the Healthcare Committee.
The member from Virgins yields to the member from Essex Junction.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We actually did not take testimony on this, but when it came forward with the conference, I did talk with several people about it. And so this program, this is something that is offered potentially through CMS. And the language here is asking Agency of Human Services to explore the program with the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. Should it be approved and we move forward, UVM-MC would not be eligible per federal guidelines for the DSH payments. Therefore, the DSH payments could be spread out through the other in-state Vermont hospitals.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I understood that part. What I don't understand is how is the UVM Health Network made whole? Does it just lose out on that money then, and it's left with a budget deficit by losing its share of the DSH funds?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, can you repeat that question?
Yes, I was saying, Madam Speaker, I understand the part that if the DSH funds, if UVM's no longer eligible for the DSH funds, it makes more available to the other hospitals. But how is UVM held harmless in some way? How does it replenish those missing funds, or is it just left to scramble to try to backfill its budget?
No, it is held whole through the program. So that would be the plan. Yes.
Thank you very much. That sounds like it would be a really positive thing if we can make it work. I appreciate the information. Madam Speaker, if to return to the conference committee member, just two other areas I wanted to ask about. One was this special review about the carbon footprint in the pension funds and looking about whether we should divest fossil fuel companies. And it's obviously something worth looking at. It just sounds very much to me like an independent discussion rather than a component of our budget. And I'm wondering why that is in the budget. It's section, it's E134.1.
The member from Virgins is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Welcome the opportunity to provide some more clarity around this particular section. This section simply directs VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee, to do a study of how much and where our pension assets are invested in fossil fuels. VPIC, as it's known, is to define the fossil fuel exposure and submit a report. And nothing here, I want to reassure people, nothing here is a mandating of divestment. It's a study and a report, and it's funded within here at $100,000. So we'll wait for the response to come back to see what and where our pension assets are invested in fossil fuels.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I'm really wondering, though, is why that didn't come through the body as a bill, as a proposal to seek this review. It doesn't sound like a typical budget item when it's not something that was discussed in the body.
As you, Madam Speaker, you're aware of that there are things that pop up that come up through the Senate, that the Senate will put in the budget that maybe the House has not seen of to date, and have had conversations. When we post the committee or the Senate budget, when it came over, we look at the differences between the House and the Senate. And this, to tell you the truth, Madam Speaker, I'm not sure if this was a point of contention, but I don't believe it was in our original budget. But the conferees did not see any reason to not agree with this. We think the body would have found this agreeable. But to the question of whether or not it was in a bill, I cannot answer that question.
I fully appreciate a response that says that's where it arrived there from. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The last question I had was actually something when I read the language, I thought it was really good news, but then it created a new question. And that involves the youth inpatient psychiatric hospital facility, the $9.225 million for that. And there is a question at the end. I think I need to give a little bit of context for the body. I believe, this was originally in our budget adjustment request, designating a hospital unit to be constructed at Southwestern Medical Center. It was removed from the budget adjustment. There was a feasibility study that was still due, and then the Senate had it in its budget. The feasibility report just came back within the last couple of weeks. And it's a good thing it came back before we locked in something for a specific hospital, because it actually said a couple of interesting things. It said that although we, by anecdote, we know we have a crisis in youth inpatient psychiatric beds, there's actually no structured data that can be used to accurately calculate the bed need. Their best guess was that it's more than 0 to 12. Which is an unusual way of saying it, I guess. But also the feasibility report raised the direct question about whether it met within Vermont's policy expectations of equitable access, because all other youth beds right now are in Brattleboro. So I was really glad to see that there's new language, that it's not locked into being Southwestern Medical Center. And I certainly understand the desire to set aside the money in this budget. But the way the language now appears, it simply gives the full amount of money for DMH to build something anywhere without any sign off by the legislature or any oversight. It's just one sentence, Madam Speaker. If I could just read the text.
You may.
It simply says 9.225 million is appropriated to the Department of Mental Health for construction of a psychiatric youth inpatient facility in the state, period. Madam Speaker, was there a reason that there is nothing giving the legislature any oversight or review role in terms of how, when, where, and so forth?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You are correct that the feasibility study that was completed, and I'm sure that the Healthcare Committee has had opportunity since its arrival to take a look at. But what we heard in the Committee of Conference was the analysis was completed by AHS, and it was determined by the Senate and then agreed upon in our conference to move forward with the project. And given the fact that the House had the original in budget adjustment, the 9.225 in reserve for this to happen, we agreed to that. I believe if you welcome the opportunity, the chair of House Human Health Care would maybe have more details on that than I.
Madam Speaker, I was only, I think you've responded, I was only wondering about the change in language where it was a designated site and now it isn't, which means it might not be in Bennington. And that leaves it open without any legislative role in that decision-making process. So if there is a further answer, that would be helpful, but that was the extent of my question.
Well, thank you. I would defer to the chair.
The member from Vergennes yields to the member from Essex Junction.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We had Department of Mental Health in just this week to testify on the feasibility study, and there is the intent is still for it to be at the Southwest Vermont Medical Center for 12 beds. And we have asked for updates throughout the summer, as well as they will be getting the certificate of need process. So I expect as the Committee of Jurisdiction, we will continue to stay abreast of the situation, but the intent by Department of Mental Health is for the facility, is for the beds to be placed at SVMC.
Thank you. I guess that doesn't clarify why we stopped saying it that in the budget, but I guess it's reflecting that the plan, in fact, is not changed, even though the language is. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to go on. I mentioned wanting to identify a couple of structural problem areas that are a concern, and that is some of the one-time funds and also some of the budget areas that are identified as pilots. Because for several of them, or many of them, it's really hard to imagine how they would not end up becoming base funds in a future year. So even though they appear to be one-time or short-lived projects, that's probably not realistic when we think about our budgets in the out years. Then it becomes a cut if it's not continued. We're back into the hotel crisis situation. You can say this is only once, it's one-time funds, but reliance is created. I'm not sure we really expect the food bank to come back next year and say, oh yeah, we're fine. That 1 year, our needs have dropped off. We don't need to get any more funding. And there are a couple of examples, one that was already mentioned in our colloquy so far, of some others that are pilot programs, the expansion of the Blueprint Hub and Spoke, which expands it from being opioid focused to broad range of addictions and co-occurring mental health, which is a 2-year pilot. Embedded in the budget are some significant mental health crisis response and urgent care programs, some of which are funded because of a very significant kind of bonus federal match that's not going to last forever. So what happens next? 2 years down the road, we're not going to have an end to our overdose problem. We're not going to have an end to our emergency department problem. Along the same lines, 159 new positions. Some of them are listed as limited service. Often we see, as we see on some of the list of positions today, turn into permanent ones. Once again, try cutting those back after they've been established. It's not very easy to turn around if we overstart spending in 1 year and lock ourselves in. And I'm not going to go rehash, but just reference some of the other multi-year costs that we have locked ourselves into for these out years by some of our other legislation, whether it's the Affordable Heat Act, our legislative salaries, the degree of the child care commitment over a multi-year basis, all on top of what's seen within this current budget that's carrying a 13% increase over last year, including the one-time funds. So those are really significant structural concerns. I think that there are a lot of ways one could defend the current budget, perhaps but for the new tax, but there's a lot of good things. I'm afraid a lot of those things are more locked in than they appear. We are building ourselves into a major corner, and then we're going to end up with not having the same health of revenues that we've been seeing and that we're exceeding this year. I do want to mention, as I said I would, some real pluses that I'm grateful that the conference committee achieved. Some of it was just in language, doing an inventory of the healthcare workforce funds that we've been putting out over the last several years. They crisscrossed, they're really good programs all over the place, but putting them together and seeing where the money actually is now that we've done it over several years with different programs was really good to see. I was very appreciative of the fact that our conferees got back in language that the Senate struck, that the House had on the planning of facilities for our justice-involved youth, that we get involvement of stakeholders before a mega proposal gets rolled out. We're talking about 3 to 4 facilities, locked facilities programs over the next period, and having stakeholders from the get-go is really important. So I'm appreciative of that, as well as the other piece for our justice-involved youth, and that was to require that there be an advanced plan to prevent the kind of disproportionality with BIPOC children that we saw at Woodside. So requiring them to develop that plan ahead of time instead of after the problem arrives. I was really glad to see, and I realized this was in the budget all along, but it's still there. That was good to see the money to implement the state employee paid leave. And it caught my eye because I thought, well, maybe that means next year when it's further along in place and implemented, we'll really be able to look in to the buy-in option so that we're not fighting over adding another 0.55 in addition to this year's 0.44 payroll tax and still be able to access that benefit for Vermonters. I was also happy to see some of the amounts of money that was reserved. Maybe not everything that was originally thought of, but a lot of federal match money preserved, which is critically important. And I was very glad, as was referenced just a short time ago, that the Medicaid provider rate increases remain reasonably robust in this budget. They came into the budget in many of these categories, came into the budget at 0% increase, which means a cut in the face of inflation. But there are health care, Medicaid increases. There are really critical community mental health provider increases. And it's important to note that the trajectory for the last several years has been to invest in new construction of institutional beds, 42 new institutional beds for mental health, instead of preventing the development of crises. So investing in our community mental health centers is incredibly important, and I'm very glad of that. I, like others in this room, would have liked to have seen more in terms of transitional supports from the hotel program, as the House pressed for. But I'm really glad to see what was added in there, that the House was able to hold to the work it had done, was able to add resources to help with that transition. But there's one thing, Madam Speaker, that more than anything else, I was really, really happy to see achieved in the conference committee, and that was coming up with the funding for the Health Equity Advisory Commission. We created that commission just several years ago in order to work on addressing very serious health disparities in the system, and it was intended that it would then create an office and create a grant program for community programs that address disparities. The commission turned in their report in February, but it wasn't reviewed by committees of jurisdiction until April. It was too late for the House budget. The Senate didn't include anything in the budget. Sometimes it feels as though something that was a really high priority was just the flavor of the year. And well, we took care of that issue. We passed a bill. And suddenly it's not so high on the radar. And that's me too. I acknowledge that. You know, a couple of years ago, I was making sure to attend as many of the Social Equity Caucus meetings as I could, be an active participant. Finding the time to carve out, I haven't done so well this year. So it's hard to sustain the focus on prior year priorities. This is one that's really important to do. So I'm very glad. And I want to briefly refocus on what that means when we talk about health inequities, the kinds of equity we're talking about specific to health, which is what this is about. And it's an area that, in terms of my own history of psychiatric disability, I really feel that that's part of what gives me such a strong affinity with others who are in groups that are discriminated against because of my experiences. So I want to talk just briefly an example of what the kind of things we mean when any number of us talk about health inequities. And in order to do that, I'll just go back to the question of that youth psychiatric inpatient unit and begin with a question to people. When you saw it in our budget adjustment right from the beginning, more than $9 million of state funds to build a unit in a private hospital. And did it come to the forefront of your mind? Wait a minute, why would we even be doing that? Don't hospitals build their own units? And I think if it was a cardiac unit that we put in our budget to build at one of the hospitals in the state, people might have started asking questions. Why would we be doing that? The reason we do it in psychiatry is because psychiatry on the inpatient level loses money. And so the state has to put in the money to meet the needs. Why does it lose money? Because insurers don't pay the full costs. The feasibility study from the Southwestern Project with the pro forma on rates for operating costs said, and Madam Speaker, if I could just quote the one phrase when it talked about funding, ongoing operational funding, it said, the initial goal, although unlikely, would be to achieve reimbursement parity across payers. Why unlikely? Because private insurers underpay the cost of care, and therefore Medicaid will need to make up the difference to pay for privately insured patients. We are still often remembering to include language in many of our bills that focus on having the voices of people who have been marginalized or left out. We're still working to do that, but it's sliding off our radar to some degree. Just a few weeks ago, Madam Speaker, your healthcare committee used language in a bill that it knew was offensive and hurtful to people, psychiatric survivors, and chose to use it without even hearing from any of those who identified it as hurtful and offensive. It was one of the most traumatic weeks I've ever spent in this body. So yes, we have a long way to go in understanding and addressing and hearing the voices to deal with health inequities. So even though it was the last minute, I am very grateful to the Committee of Conference for including that money for the Health Equity Advisory Commission to continue its work. Madam Speaker, I've used the analogy, and quite frankly, I can't remember if I used it when we were dealing with the budget adjustment, but I know I used it in a constituent update that I did. The analogy to going grocery shopping in terms of building a budget. You try to choose carefully based on your priority needs. You don't want to be extravagant. You can't necessarily add up everything in your head, but you're trying to stay within your means. You get to the checkout and you realize you don't have enough in your wallet to pay for what you put in the cart. So you've got to put some back. Unless I get a salary raise, in which case I can go back and get the missing items. But my economic growth has to meet the money that I am going to spend on those groceries. I can't take out a loan hoping for future income increase. And without that income, I can't buy it. Madam Speaker, as I said, I use that analogy in one of my constituent updates. And the response I got was that that was a lousy analogy because I used the terminology, if I can't afford to pay. And he said, it's not if I can't afford to pay, it's what you're imposing on us to pay. And that's the bottom line when we pass a budget, Madam Speaker. It's what we are expecting Vermonters to pay, and in this budget to pay increases beyond their existing personal revenues and burdens on their incomes in the new taxes and fees that are used to put together the 13% plus increase. I can't do that to my constituents, so I will be voting no, despite knowing the level of needs, also knowing that we cannot go beyond what we can afford to be doing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Bridport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am so appreciative of the work that has gone into this budget in our committees throughout the session, in appropriations, and in the Committee of Conference. Members have worked so hard to create investments across the spectrum. Investments in Vermonters, our lands, our children, and investments that would have a positive impact for generations to come. I am, however, deeply concerned that rather than creating a transitional ramp to end the COVID-era GA emergency housing program, we have created a cliff. And the effects of that decision will be more damaging than most in this body can even begin to imagine. I've made it no secret that not only do I work in a shelter in my life outside the Capitol, but that I experienced homelessness as a young adult. I learned a lot of lessons during that time of my life. I learned how hard it is to assimilate and shed the shame from the looks of disgust from passersby, or the ones who act as if you don't even exist at all. I still struggle with that one. I learned that despite the good intentions of the work that happens in this building and many false narratives on the matter, at this time, the only way out of poverty is pure blind luck. However, the most important lesson I learned as a young, unhoused woman, largely alone in this world, was the unparalleled value of a door of your own with a lock on it. In 19 days, we send 766 households out into the streets. 30 days later, we send an additional 1,556 households, 28 individuals, 500 to 600 of whom are children. Most of these people are experiencing stability for the first time in their lives, and we are stripping them of their most basic of needs, sending them into crisis and then out into our communities, unsheltered. We have created a powder keg, and in 19 days, we light the first match. Madam Speaker, may I read a letter from my colleagues in this work around the state?
You may.
We are heartbroken by lawmakers' inaction on avoiding a crisis with the end of the GA emergency housing program for most people experiencing homelessness. Our communities are ill-equipped to respond to the humanitarian needs of the population to be evicted from hotel rooms. These needs include access to shelter, service providers, medical care, food, electricity for medical devices, medicine, and bathrooms with showers. Inaction will result in people dying. The price of this exodus from hotels will be paid in our local communities, emergency responders, police departments, local retailers, and municipal institutions such as libraries. There are no available humane alternatives to motel rooms. Emergency shelters run by nonprofits are at full capacity. Hospital emergency rooms are full and understaffed. There are no apartments available for people with limited or no financial resources. There are no opportunities to stand up new shelter beds quickly enough. We are left with cars and tents and bridge overpasses. This for families with children, people who are disabled, and the elderly. We have a moral imperative to do more. Signs, A New Place, Cathedral Square, Charter House Coalition, Committee on Temporary Shelter, End Homelessness Vermont, Elevate Youth Services, Family Center of Washington County, Good Samaritan Haven, Groundworks Collaborative, John Graham Housing and Services, Northeast Kingdom Community Action, Spectrum Youth and Family Services, Springfield Supported Housing Program, Upper Valley Haven, Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance, Vermont Legal Aid, Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, Madam Speaker, out of deep love and solidarity with my colleagues across the state and the precious human lives that we serve, I will be voting no on this bill.
Member from Brattleboro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a point of information for the member from Northfield that the Senate did pass a pension divestment bill, S42, and I believe it came to the House. Forgetting the general housing and military affairs. Or is that the wrong name of the, I can't remember the new committee name. Representative McCarthy's committee. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Are you ready for the question? Member from Orwell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The hour is late. I will try to be brief. I just wanted to say that we have in front of us an amazing, good, progressive budget, a budget that each and every one of us has put heart and soul into over months, and no more than the Committee on Conference that I know worked so incredibly hard on this and put so much time into making sure that progressive policies that will make changes for Vermonters are contained in this budget. But the thing is, Madam Speaker, that this budget contains a poison pill that is going to kick people out of the motel room door, and what we're going to say to them is, don't let the door hit you on the behind on the way back. That is what this budget does. Nearly every single person in this chamber right now is elected on housing, elected on the housing crisis, and our answer to the housing crisis is to throw people off of a cliff when we could have built them an off-ramp. This budget is a choice. There is money to help these people. We are choosing not to help them. We've been told several times by members that there's many good things in here for our housing crisis, and they're entirely telling the truth. I'm not going to bother to list them because other members have already spoken so much about them. But the thing is, Madam Speaker, that we're being asked to pit two things against each other. There's a false dichotomy here, two things that don't need to be pitted against each other. We do not need to pit temporary housing against permanent housing. Both are possible. Both are things that we can do. Both are things that we are choosing not to do. And we're choosing not to do them. And when we choose not to do them, what we're telling those people is that other things matter more than you do. That's what we're telling them. And that's something I refuse to be a party to. We have an opportunity to fix this. We have a moral imperative to fix this. And even if my no vote does not win the day today, at least when I go home after this session is over, I know I can look in the mirror, I know I can look my neighbors in the eyes, and I know I can say that I tried not to yank the roof off from over your head. Thank you.
Member from Swanton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to recognize there are 10 members in the chamber with 15 or more years of experience of service, 15 or more years of service to Vermonters in this body. And for the huge number of us that are finishing our first full session, I wanted you to know that among you, there's 10 plus people with 15 years that have been here long enough to know the last time that Vermont state government was in major financial distress. Revenue projections were coming in below projections and slowing, and new programs and expenses were being built and expanded and increased. And that legislature overrode a very popular governor's veto and pushed through a major budget increase. That time was 2009, 2010. And for the next 3 sessions, the legislature struggled with a major financial problem. Those 10 members can tell you of the challenge for change. They can tell you of the cutbacks, the elimination of all their new programs, the elimination of many programs, the RIFs, the reduction in force of state employees, layoffs of state employees. Fast forward today. Madam Speaker, I support most every program in this budget, but with a big plead for a far more restrained financial approach, approach that was within Vermonters' means. In the interest of shortening it, we're skipping all the way down to, there are some storm clouds on the horizon. We heard from Vermont economists here many, many times during this session, all the way back to the budget adjustment. I do believe in the next year there will be a huge amount of carryover funds that'll be left to kind of patch the holes as these new programs get stood up, and we'll be able to hide for a little while longer how much we've overcommitted. But that time is coming, and there is a major gap. And to be clear, our successors are going to face some major financial constraints, and they will have no surpluses to use to cover them. And our successors will have a citizenry, too late to talk now. We will have citizens that are even more heavily taxed than they are today. Whoops. They will be even more heavily taxed. Madam Speaker, this is what I see out in the horizon. I suppose there is some comfort in knowing that the future House members that will be compensated over twice as much to solve the challenges than we were for the ones we send to them. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from St. Albans City.
Madam Speaker, this budget, it's a product of the work of each committee, and it keeps the promises that many of us made to Vermonters. One member reminded me today about the enormous lift it was to do a $30 million housing bond a few short years ago. And here we are investing far, far more to build more housing. No budget that we could craft will solve all of the problems for all Vermonters. I'm voting yes this evening to invest in a Vermont with more places for people to make a permanent home affordably. I share the frustration about what is not possible in this budget. I know it's not enough, but I'm voting yes for this budget to support new housing in St. Albans and in so many communities across Vermont. I'm also voting yes for the huge step forward we are taking in something that my committee will hopefully work on more in the future, which is regional dispatch. I want to thank the Appropriations Committee, especially the member from Chittenden, for his many visits to the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee in the last week or so. And I'm not just talking about the amendments that he brought us. He was a diligent partner, quickly working to rework Senate dispatch language over the weekend to help us hash out a path to begin the process of inventorying and fixing our patchwork public safety dispatch system. The dispatch task force and the investment this budget makes in preparing for a better regional dispatch system, it's a work in progress, but it's the best step forward we've had in years, decades of trying to tackle this. That work in progress, that's a theme, not just in this budget, but in every budget. I'm voting yes for what this budget accomplishes, acknowledging that we have more work to do. We have more to do to improve public safety, to reduce poverty, and make sure all Vermonters can live with dignity. This budget makes powerful, historic strides investing in the people and programs and housing that will support more permanent homes for Vermonters. I hope you'll join me in voting yes.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Newfane.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this budget and the investments, the values, and the needs of Vermonters that are reflected in it. This budget meets critical obligations to our pension, transportation, and clean water funds. It also makes essential investments that speak to our deeply held values and priorities: housing, workforce, and economic development, human services, child care, and climate action. We are funding critical housing assistance and support programs. We are implementing provider rate increases, funding prevention and recovery programs, feeding food insecure Vermonters, increasing technical assistance and capacity for regional dispatch, creating more capacity for after-school programs, expanding our workforce in our most needed professions, such as nursing, dental hygienists, and mental health, continuing climate and environmental initiatives, and the list goes on and on. This is an $8.45 billion budget, and every line on the spreadsheets, every investment reflects the needs of Vermonters in each of our communities and across our entire state. I hope you will join me in voting yes in strong support for this budget, because this is how we show up for Vermonters. This is how we make government work for people.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Are you ready for the question? Member from Burlington, Winooski, excuse me.
Oof, Madam Speaker, it's getting late. Thank you. I want to start by offering my deepest respect to the Appropriations Committee and the insurmountable work that was ahead of them this year. Though there was so much money and so many investments that needed to be made, it still took a lot of choice. In this session, Madam Speaker, I was tasked, along with the member from Bridport, to look into the homelessness crisis and to find a humane path forward to those in the GA Emergency Housing Program, since the administration for the past 3 years has failed to do so, has failed to give us that off-ramp, that safe, humane off-ramp. And what we ultimately learned time and time again with every person that we spoke with is that homelessness in Vermont is a policy choice. It has always been a policy choice before the pandemic and now. So we offered a plan, multiple plans, to our committee, to the Appropriations Committee, even to you, Madam Speaker. And yet here we are. This body is now choosing to follow the path that the governor laid before us and put forward a budget that will exit over 3,000 people, including children, older adults, people with disabilities, those who are pregnant, and who are fleeing domestic violence back into unsafe situations. As state leaders, it is our responsibility to create a responsible transition plan, especially when this administration refuses to plan or act on the crisis before us. We must not abdicate our responsibility to care for all Vermonters. Our communities, our hospitals, long-term care facilities, state employees, and our already overtaxed shelter workers are not prepared to handle this crisis. Yes, we have made immense investments in services. And yes, it is going to take time for those monies to get out to those service providers. And yet we are kicking people out on July 1st. We have talked a lot about the adverse weather conditions policy that has housed homeless Vermonters for a specified period of time and was extended by this body in our Budget Adjustment Act this year. But prior to the pandemic, this same policy put the onus on participants in the program to find a way to access the weather forecast to figure out whether temperatures or wind chill are less than 20 degrees, or that temperatures are less than 32 degrees, but with a higher than 50% chance of precipitation. And that would only guarantee them one night of housing. If the weather changed the next night, they were out. Policies are not governed by this body. We have no oversight over policies created by the various agencies of the state. And the administration has made it clear time and time again that they want this emergency housing program to end, that they want our most vulnerable Vermonters left out on the street with a tent and maybe a sleeping bag. So I can't understand why in this budget we say that the agency may, by policy, provide temporary housing for a limited time, duration, and adverse weather conditions. I see us reverting back to that time where folks have to check the weather to see whether or not they're actually going to be in housing. I have heard and I recognize that we need both housing and services. During the pandemic, we learned that we did not invest enough money in the services required by those with complex needs in the emergency housing program. And this budget invests the necessary funds into these much needed services. Yet I fear that we focused only on the services. We didn't focus on housing. I need to remind the body that there are no shelter beds available. That is why people are in hotel rooms right now. There are no affordable housing units available. That's why we are building them. The Vermonters that have accessed vouchers, whether they are Section 8 or whether they are our home family housing vouchers, are waiting over 250 days to get into a unit. And yet these same vouchers expire after 120 days. The math doesn't add up. As we heard, the building that we that we have funded may not even happen for 2 years. And yet we are kicking people out in less than 2 months from now. It's true. Our state budget reflects our values as Vermonters. And this budget does not value the humanity of those experiencing homelessness. That is why I, Madam Speaker, cannot support this budget and will be voting no.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Member from Morristown.
Madam Speaker, I'm a new member. I came here with no agenda for my first year, other than to listen, observe, learn, and pass policy that most correlates within the purview of my own working lens to benefit Vermonters. The framework from which I operate is 1, are things equitable? 2, have we explored multiple possibilities for unintended consequences? 3, are we meeting the needs of the most vulnerable and marginalized people, in turn meeting the needs of everyone? I respect this body. I've honored the process. And even though it is antiquated and, in my opinion, often does not serve us well, I respect the system. Like our system, homelessness is not a new issue. This could have and should have been addressed in a more meaningful and comprehensive way throughout the session, not negotiations and last stands during the last week. We are told, I'll speak for myself. I've been told you have many opportunities to work on these bills that come to the floor before they come to the floor. I honestly have not found that to be true. The administration, I've heard things in the halls. The administration should have, the governor should have, the Senate should have, committees should have, we should have. The bottom line, Madam Speaker, humans are not disposable. I was told to trust that each committee would do their part, as we have to work within the confines of jurisdiction and germaneness, only to end up where we are today. Maybe I'm hypersensitive because I've experienced chronic homelessness in the not so distant past. Maybe we need a better system or way of working together towards a common goal, which many of us seem to have shared the common sentinelity in that sentiment today. The responsibility is with all of us. I believe in, respect, and appreciate the work the committees have done. And at the same time, sending the message, we need to do better. I am using the only power I have in this building, my one vote, not in protest, but in principle. And I want to thank my colleagues who will use their vote to vote against maybe your conscience, to vote yes, so that I can make this statement, Madam Speaker. Because I believe in the Vermont legislature. Vermont has taken the lead on so many issues. And I believe there is enough wisdom, skill, creativity, lived experience, and expertise in this collective body where we can come back next year with a budget that doesn't leave people behind, including Vermonters who are unhoused. And for that reason, tonight I will vote no.
Member from Barrytown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It looks like this evening's made for some strange bedfellows. To me, this budget brings to mind images of Nero fiddling while Rome burns. We have engaged in landmark spending while storm clouds of recession and tough times loom on the horizon. We have stood up programs that will have lasting costs with time and money. Many of us seek to congratulate ourselves on our good work. What I see is irresponsible governance from members that would raise a glass with the mad emperor of a fallen civilization.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Are you ready for the question? If so, will the clerk please commence to call the roll?
Andrews of Westford.
Yes. 1 minute. Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? Will the House please come to order? I would like to remind members that we are in the middle of a roll call vote. Members and guests are prohibited from using computers, phones, or any type of electronic device. Please refrain from passing notes and conversations during a roll call. When the clerk calls your name, please answer in a loud and clear voice so the clerk can accurately record your vote. I'd like to remind members, if you are giving a vote explanation, to have it written down and short. The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Conference be adopted? Will the clerk please continue to call the roll?
Andriano of Orwell. Anthony of Berry City.
Yes.
Harrison of Weathersfield.
Yes.
Arsenault of Williston.
Yes.
Austin of Colchester. Bartholomew of Heartland.
Yes.
Bartley of Fairfax.
No.
Beck of St. Johnsbury.
No.
Rebecca of Winooski.
Yes.
Byrong of Virgins.
Yes.
Black of Essex.
Yes.
Bloomley of Burlington.
Yes.
Bongarts of Manchester.
Yes.
Boslin of Westminster.
No.
Boyden of Cambridge.
Yes.
Brady of Williston.
Yes.
Brannigan of Georgia.
No.
Brennan of Colchester. Brown of Richmond. Brownell of Pownell. Brumstead of Shelburne. Burdett of West Rutland. Burke of Brattleboro. Burrows of West Windsor. Buss of Woodstock. Buss of Woodstock. Thanks. Campbell of St. Johnsbury. Canfield of Fairhaven. Carpenter of Hyde Park. Carroll Bennington. Casey Montpelier. Chapin of East Montpelier. Chase of Chester. Chase of Colchester. Chestnut Tangerman of Middletown Springs. Christie of Hartford. Chena of Burlington. Clifford of Rutland City. Coffee of Guilford. Cole of Hartford. Conlon of Cornwall. Corcoran of Bennington. Cordes of Lincoln. DeMar of Venusburg. Demrow of Corinth. Dickinson of St. Albans Town. Dodge of Essex. Dolan of Essex Junction. Dolan of Waitsfield. Donahue of Northfield. Durfee of Shaftesbury. Elder of Starksboro. Emmons of Springfield. Farley's Rubio of Barnet. Galfetti of Berrytown. Garifano of Essex. Goldman of Rockingham. Ghostland of Northfield. Graham of Williamstown. Granning of Jericho. Gregoire of Fairfield. Hango Berkshire. Harrison of Chittenden. Hedrick of Burlington. Higley of Lowell. Holcomb of Norwich. Hooper of Randolph. Hooper of Burlington. Houghton of Essex Junction. Howard of Rutland City. Hyman of South Burlington. James of Manchester. Jerome of Brandon. Kornheiser of Brattleboro. Krasnow of South Burlington. Labor of Morgan. LaBounty of Linden. Lally of Shelburne. Lalonde of South Burlington. Lamont of Morristown. Lanford of Virgins. LaRush of Franklin. Levitt of Grand Isle. Lipsky of Stowe. Logan of Burlington. Long of Newfane. McGuire of Rutland City. Marcotte of Coventry. Maslin of Thetford. Matos of Milton. McCann of Montpelier. McCarthy of St. Albans City. McCoy of Poultney. McFawn of Berrytown. McGill of Bridport. Mahali of Callis. Minier of South Burlington. Morgan of Milton. Morris of Springfield. Morrissey of Bennington. Rowicki of Putney. Mulvaney Stanek of Burlington. Nicole of Ludlow. Nod of Rutland City. Noyes of Wolcott. Nugent of South Burlington. O'Brien of Tunbridge. Odie of Burlington. Oliver of Sheldon. Page of Newport City. Pyala of Londonderry. Parsons of Newberry. Pat of Worcester. Pearl of Danville. Peterson of Clarendon. Pouch of Heinsberg. Priestley of Bradford. Rachelson of Burlington. Rice of Dorset. Roberts of Halifax. Samus of Castleton. Sakowitz of Randolph. Shy of Middlebury. Shaw of Pittsford. Sheldon of Middlebury. Sibelia of Dover. Sims of Craftsbury. Sims of Craftsbury. Thank you. Small of Winooski. Smith of Derby. Squirrel of Underhill. Stebbins of Burlington. Stevens of Waterbury. Stone of Burlington. Supernaught of Barnard. Taylor of Milton. Taylor of Colchester. Templeman of Brownington. Tolino of Brattleboro. Toof of St. Albans Town. Torrey of Moortown. Troiano, Stannard.
Yes.
Walker is Swanton. Waters Evans is Charlotte.
Yes.
White of Bethel. Whitman of Bennington. Williams Berry City. Williams Granby.
No.
Wilson of Linden. Wood of Waterbury. Brownell of Pownell. Graham of Williamstown. Maslin of Thetford. O'Brien of Tunbridge. Pearl of Danville. And Wilson of Linden.
For purpose of explanation, member from Orwell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I vote against this budget in solidarity with the Vermonters who will be out on the streets as of July 1st. I cannot ethically support a document that makes a conscious choice to shove people off a cliff when it just as easily could have built them an off-ramp. Thank you.
Member from Williston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted yes for all the good this budget will enable and in recognition of the diligent work of this body's committees. However, I rise to apologize to the Vermonters who will soon be unhoused due to the governor's lack of a responsible transition plan to end the motel voucher program. I commit to learning and then doing my part in the name of oversight, and I call on the administration to do theirs in the name of basic humanity. We can still find a way to ensure that folks remain housed while winding down the motel voucher program, which was never intended to be permanent. I don't quite understand how we got here, as the crisis we face was entirely predictable. But I implore each of us and every responsible state agency to take an active role in finding a true solution.
Member from Westminster.
A lot of important policy is reflected in this budget, which can benefit Vermont and Vermonters, but it is missing one critical allocation: funding a responsible, compassionate transition out of hotel housing. I do believe the program needs to be phased out in a careful way that supports both the needs of individuals and our communities. I have been a case manager with homeless youth. At the beginning of the pandemic, I worked with individuals that were sheltered in hotels. I cannot support a bill that evicts every individual currently housed in hotels without time to make supportive plans. A director of a Vermont emergency housing program told me he was trying to get sleeping bags and tents to send current hotel residents out with some form of shelter. This is inadequate and inhumane for impacted individuals and will be extremely difficult for our communities and our service providers too. With a bit more time and coordination, better options could be secured to make a smoother transition for all. I cannot support a budget that sends Vermonters out of temporary housing onto the streets, into the woods, or to living in their cars. This was the hardest vote I have ever cast, but I had to vote no.
Member from East Montpelier.
I vote yes to support the important and forward-thinking investments and programs in this budget. Yet I also want to express that my heart is broken for the inadequacy of our collective plan and funding to transition people out of the hotels and motels, people who will shortly have nowhere to live. And I am deeply concerned about the community and emergency organizations and healthcare providers who are already stressed and understaffed after years of pandemic and workforce shortages. The timing is off between the impacts of our positive investments we are making and the forced unhousing to come.
Member from Hartford.
Madam Speaker, the roots of houselessness are systemic and multi-layered. Despite the culture of American individualism and belief in a strong work ethic that some of us hold onto so dearly. In the United States, the cost of a single health problem can be expensive enough to strip the roof out from over someone's head. It strikes me that 75% of the households utilizing the GA Motel Voucher Program contain at least one member with disabilities. I believe that motel vouchers would not be a part of today's discussion if we could cut the relationship between health and housing status by implementing single-payer health insurance in our state. I appreciate the investment that the legislature has proposed in addressing some of the root causes of our state's challenges at the intersection of health and housing. In contrast, I am disappointed by the governor's recent messaging, which claims cost savings through underinvestment, while relying on Vermonters' tax dollars to treat these issues in inefficient and undignified ways, which are untraceable back to his budget proposal, including increased emergency room visits, incarceration, emergency services, hunger, and addiction. In the coming months, it will be the state's duty to guarantee the safe transition of all Vermonters previously housed in the GA program. It is also the state's duty to target the underlying causes of houselessness. I believe that this budget is a partial yet important step in fulfilling these duties. Member from Berkshire.
Madam Speaker, here we sit concluding our business of passing legislation, initiatives requiring new funding sources, adding hundreds of millions of dollars that will burden working Vermonters by increasing taxes and fees across many sectors. While this budget contains many worthy programs, I cannot support this unsustainable increase. Tens of millions of those dollars are allocated to new positions within state government to administer these new programs or to expand existing ones. That leads me to a real dilemma. On one hand, we're desperate for more workers. Yet on the other hand, we are driving those very workers away from our state. Madam Speaker, for $3.5 million, we have had the opportunity each year that I have sat in this seat to attract and retain a ready-made, skilled workforce. Sadly, this legislation has remained on the wall, a bill to exempt all military pensions and survivors' benefits from state income tax, a bill that would honor the sacrifices that families have made for our freedom to sit here today. $3.5 million in the scheme of spending hundreds of millions of dollars is a drop in the bucket. It is my hope that when we return in January, we can finally put aside our differences and come together to do the right thing to honor the men and women and their families who served or gave the ultimate sacrifice with this modest measure of gratitude. Thank you.
Member from Montpelier.
This budget reflects hard work and good policy that will benefit so many Vermonters, but it's missing an acceptable off-ramp for the GA program housing our most vulnerable community members. Emergency shelters with cots and meals is not acceptable. Tents are not acceptable. Putting the responsibility for these individuals and families on our cities and towns is not acceptable. Unhousing 600 children is not acceptable. Without a budget that reflects a responsible end to the motel program, I voted no.
Member from Poultney.
Madam Speaker, while there are many good things this budget funds, and this may sound strange, that is exactly the problem. With the passage of the child care bill this evening, this budget is an overall increase of 13.3%. Given we are already seeing downgrades in our incoming revenue, I am concerned we will be back here in January cutting many of the initiatives we approved tonight. A 20% increase in DMV fees, the unknown cost of the clean heat standard, a $90 million payroll tax, millions of dollars in OPR fees, and we are looking to give ourselves a 50% raise. While not all of these are contained in the budget, we must take a broader look at our financial picture. I cannot support this rate of spending and new taxes and fees. My constituents cannot afford the decisions we have made this session. My constituents cannot afford this budget. We are breaking the backs of Vermonters.
Member from Bridport.
Madam Speaker, I voted no on this bill because I can't in good conscience support a budget that does not recognize and support the humanity in all Vermonters.
Member from Milton.
Madam Speaker, this budget was done with a tremendous amount of hard work by our friends in appropriations, and that is appreciated. This budget provides for many, many great programs and initiatives for the state, however, at a cost that is not sustainable. I'm fearful that with already decreasing state revenues, as predicted by our state economists, they were very likely setting ourselves on a trajectory for financial failure. We are arguably the third or fourth highest taxed state in the nation. I hear from my constituents all the time that this must change. With the direction this budget is heading, with the staggering increases to the baseline, we are not changing anything, but are on a path of financial hardship for hardworking Vermonters.
Member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am voting no today because I must vote my conscience, and I stand with my unhoused neighbors. We can and must do better. This is a policy problem we can still solve, not a money problem.
Member from Rutland City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted yes for this budget in recognition of the hard work done by my colleagues in this building over the course of the legislative session. I voted yes in recognition of all the positive effects the components of this budget will have on the residents of our state. This budget, as it always is a compromise. But the sum of its parts is a positive, a step forward, and a promise for the future. The care and diligence put into this budget is obvious, and so is the hope. For all these reasons, I voted yes.
Member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This budget does so much for so many Vermonters. My no vote in no way reflects the House's hard work or our House Budget Conferee's advocacy and efforts. I voted no because despite the House's work and efforts, 1,800 households, including 700 children, will be forced out of their housing in just a few short weeks. The impact of having so many people needing housing and assistance is going to be a tsunami. Our human services and housing organizations are amazing, but they are not miracle workers. Housing Vermonters in motels isn't the answer and is unsustainable. I'm excited that we're increasing our housing stock, but with the lack of available, affordable housing now, I'm gravely concerned about the well-being of the people we are putting out. I've read about the gradual and planned success other states and municipalities have had with these very same transitions. We're saving the expense of paying motels the rates they were demanding, but Vermont and our local communities will all pay for the burden that will be shifted to our healthcare, social services, law enforcement, education, and justice systems. And most of all, I am concerned about the additional stress and obstacles we're placing on so many vulnerable Vermonters.
Member from Castleton.
Madam Speaker, let's keep the safety and well-being of our most vulnerable above politics and actually do something about it for a change. It is not only our responsibility, it is our duty. The time is now, not later. It is up to us. I will vote no.
Member from Winooski.
Madam Speaker, I refuse to sign the death certificates of our most vulnerable Vermonters. That is what we are doing with this Budgets on Housing plan. That is why I vote no.
Member from St. Albans Town.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Although I agree with many initiatives associated with this budget, I cannot and will not support a budget increase of over 13%. This budget raises taxes and fees on working Vermonters while hurting the very people we claim to want to help. A 20% increase in DM fees alone is enough for me to vote no, but a 13% base increase is just too much. I'm afraid we will have to raise taxes in future years to keep these promises. I vote no.
Member from Newfane.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Madam Speaker, I voted yes on this budget because it makes critical investments that reflects the needs of Vermonters in all 14 counties. It supports programs and policies that help people each and every day.
Member from Wolcott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted in favor of this budget because it makes investments in our home and community-based service providers. Over the past decades, we have underfunded many of these programs that are essential to meet the needs of an aging population. Assisted community care services, adult day providers, enhanced residential care, and home-delivered meals, to name a few. If we are to make Vermont the best state to grow old in, we need to continue to make these kinds of investments in these services and supports.
Please listen to the member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this is the hardest vote I've had to navigate in my 15 years in this body. My yes vote today is for all the positive investments in this budget. However, I'm deeply disturbed by the negative aspects of this budget, by the loss of shelter soon to be faced by individuals in our communities. We will all be called on to help alleviate the harm.
Member from Barrytown.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Madam Speaker, I voted no because I will not blame a governor that presented us with a budget that did not raise taxes or fees and had good provisions for all of the programs that we have in this budget for dropping the ball. Perhaps if we had left some meat on the bone, we, the legislature, could have built the off-ramp our homeless deserve, as is our duty.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yes, 90. Those voting no, 53. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee of Conference. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to order the following bills be delivered to the governor forthwith? House Bill 67, which is an act relating to household products containing hazardous substances. House Bill 126, which is an act relating to community resilience and biodiversity protection. House Bill 227, which is an act relating to the Uniform Power of Attorney Act. House Bill 270, which is an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the adult use and medical cannabis programs. House Bill 471, which is an act relating to technical and administrative changes to Vermont's tax laws. House Bill 472, which is an act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects. House Bill 480, which is an act relating to property valuation and reappraisals. House Bill 517, which is an act relating to the approval of the dissolution of the Duxbury-Moretown Fire District Number 1, and House Bill 494, which is an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government.
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to order the following bills: H67, H126, H227, H270, H471, H472, H480, H517, and H494 to be delivered to the governor forthwith.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered the following bills to be delivered to the governor: House Bill 67, House Bill 126, House Bill 227, House Bill 270, House Bill 471, House Bill 472, House Bill 480, House Bill 517, and House Bill 494. Members, that completes the orders of the day. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to direct the clerk to inform the Senate that the House has completed its business of the first half of the biennial session and is ready to adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion the clerk be directed to inform the Senate that the House has completed its business of the first half of the biennial session and is ready to adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have directed the clerk to inform the Senate that the House has completed its business and is ready to adjourn pursuant to JRS 27. Members, at this time, it is our custom to hear from House leadership as we move closer to final adjournment. We'll start with the member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is my first session serving as a caucus leader and only my second term as a legislator. I appreciate the confidence my small but mighty Progressive House caucus instilled in me by electing me to be their leader this session. I am proud of the role of our caucus plays in this body to expand our collective capacity to consider what is truly possible and what is needed to solve the complex problems facing our state. I would particularly like to extend my deep gratitude to my assistant leader, the member from Winooski, or Taylor Swift, as my 8-year-old routinely corrects me. She is indeed a rock star. The member from Winooski's strategic mind and mastery of complex policy work is unmatched by many in this building. I learned so much from her as I work alongside her every day. She is also a lifesaver as she capably takes the lead whenever I need her, as I juggle being a mom of small children and working a second job while we are in session. And to our whole caucus, you each bring incredible expertise, skill, and great wit and style to this body. The Vermont House and our collective policy work is better for having you here. You are incredibly thoughtful and committed to the well-being of the most vulnerable people in our communities. I thank you. I would like to extend my appreciation and gratitude to the entire House leadership team. In 2021, the Vermont House made history by electing women to every House leadership role, including our amazing House clerk. I am honored to be part of this continued historic pattern of leadership in the House. I would like to thank the member from Newfane and the member from Poultney for finding points of collaboration in our work together and for welcoming me as a new but equal member of the leadership team with an ethic of mentorship, fairness, and care. I could have easily been overlooked when the other two major parties so significantly dwarf our small caucus. It shows a level of respect for our multi-party system in this building, and I hope continues to grow in ways that result in even better policy work. It is an honor to serve alongside both of you as such capable and steady leaders of your caucuses. And Madam Speaker, specifically to you, I have learned so much from you about the unseen and more subtle components of what it takes to be a leader of a 150-member legislative body. Everything from complex strategy to how to show sincere care for every member's well-being. You are deeply committed to this institution and keeping our democratic process functional, fair, and effective. In recent months, we have seen this is not the case in every state legislature. I commend and appreciate your leadership. You personify Vermont values political diversity and a fair and strong legislative process. Thank you. And I have two more brief but important appreciations. Our legislative staff are essential to the work as a body. Our caucus would like to extend our gratitude to all of the staff, the Legislative Council attorneys and editors. Thank you for your patience with the brilliant but numerous progressive-sponsored bills. All of the clerks and assistants, thank you for your diligent commitment to our rules and serving as great and patient teachers. The legislative operations crew, thank you for helping us stay paid on time, online, and functional within the building. To the committee assistants, thank you for your skillful managing of the diverse personalities in this building and also giving the best cabaret performance. Sergeant of Arms staff, thank you for keeping the trains running on time, supporting our amazing pages and the many Band-Aids so I can wear my fancy shoes every day. Capitol Police, thank you for keeping us safe and being committed to our well-being inside and outside of this building. And finally, the building facilities and food service staff for keeping us well-fed and caretaking this beautiful building. Each of these employees holds themselves to a high level of professionalism and commitment to high quality work. We are all extremely fortunate. Thank you. And finally, although they're in bed, and most importantly, I would like to extend appreciation to our families, friends, and larger communities who enable us to be able to serve. I often say this is a team sport, and it starts with the people who love and support us at home. In particular, I appreciate my wife, Megan, children, Ruby and Elliot, My wife runs adventure races in the middle of the wilderness in her spare time. I have no idea why, requiring orienteering, lack of sleep, and endurance. She calls the legislature my adventure race. It sure is. There is no better or stranger job out there. I look forward to continuing to work with members of this body off session and into January as we continue to find meaningful solutions to support working families and our most vulnerable neighbors. Thank you.
Member from Poultney.
No clapping, I guess. Okay. I will. I appreciate your speech. Madam Speaker and fellow members of the House of Representatives, I begin by thanking our unsung heroes of our legislature, who are our incredible staff here at the State House. A sincere and heartfelt thanks to our clerk staff, ably guided by House Clerk Betsy Ann Rask, to Jen Garby and our Legislative Counsel, Catherine Benham and the staff at JFO, Mike Ferrant and our Legislative Office team, Janet Miller and her Sergeant-at-Arms office staff, Matt Romei and our Capitol Police, our IT wizards under the direction of Kevin Moore, and last but certainly not least, our custodial and cafeteria staff, who made sure the People's House was always ready for us, as well as our visitors and friends. Thank you so very much. I would like to recognize the 47 new members to this body. Our freshman class has added much to the conversation, and I look forward to working with you next year. It is truly an honor to be a part of this special body known as the Vermont House of Representatives and serve as its minority leader. This house is an amazing institution, and we are truly fortunate to serve within it. A special thanks to Casey Toof, Mark Higley, and Ann Donahue. Every member of our House Republican Caucus has made important contributions and is an integral part of our team. I often think of us as the little engine that could. Your dedication and integrity are unmatched, and I am so unbelievably proud to serve the people of Vermont by your side. Thank you to House Majority Leader Emily Long and Progressive Leader Emma Mulvaney Stanek for your patience and cooperation during some challenging debates. It is an honor to serve in leadership with you both. As I have said in the past, the role of House Minority Leader is certainly not for the faint of heart. It often seems as we are the party of no. We ask tough questions, propose amendments, and deliver vote explanations on our positions on bills that will profoundly affect our constituents. We remain respectful to the body, the process, our colleagues in the other parties, House leadership, and you, Madam Speaker. It is not always easy, but I am so proud of our caucus's collective efforts. Madam Speaker, thank you for listening and taking all sides into consideration before acting. I am thankful and proud to work closely with you in addressing the challenging issues of our day as we continue preserving the integrity of this magnificent body for future leaders. I am also thankful that you and I can share our frustrations at times without the aid of an anger translator. However, if I ever need one, I know exactly where to find one. Member from Bennington. As always, I wish a happy birthday to those members celebrating their special day from now until January. And finally, I want to thank the most important people in our lives, our families, extended families and friends who put up with us as we commit to doing our jobs as public servants. It is not always easy, and it is demanding at times, especially the last day of session. So, on behalf of all of us, I wish to publicly thank our home base, those people who we lean on and depend on a day-to-day basis for making our jobs a bit easier, knowing we have their support. Take care, everyone, and stay well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Newfane.
Madam Speaker and House colleagues, it is hard to believe that we're already here at the end of this session. For the first time since May of 2019, today we are ending our session the same way we began it, fully in person from start to finish. Let that sink in for a minute. This is the first time since 2019 that we have completed a session fully in person, and for that I am truly grateful. We have accomplished so much this year. We've passed legislation that takes historic steps forward in climate action, childcare, and workforce and economic development. We passed patient and provider protections for reproductive and gender-affirming health care. We passed major legislation to address the critical lack of housing that is felt in every corner of our state. These investments and many others will meet the needs of Vermonters now and into the future. And we will continue to focus on building an economy that leaves no Vermonter behind. The heightened intensity of our work as we wind our way toward the end of session typically reminds us of our appreciation for those that we work with. And the end of session allows us a time to publicly express our gratitude for those people. After all, the work we do is all about people, those we serve with, and those we work with while serving. It is about listening to each other and respecting our different perspectives, even when we don't agree. Our work relies on the fundamentals of trust and respect in order to efficiently achieve our successes. Legislators couldn't do this work alone, though, and this is a time to recognize those who are the foundation of our success. And at the top of that list is our dedicated staff who work tirelessly on our behalf. So to all the staff in our Legislative Council, IT, Operations, and Human Resources departments, to our indispensable custodial staff and committee assistants, to the exceptional staff in our clerk's office, our joint fiscal office, our Capitol Police, and our Sergeant at Arms office, we thank you. Thank you for your talent, your dedication, and for working so hard over such long hours on our behalf. We simply could not do the work we do without you. My thanks and gratitude go to Leader McCoy and Leader Mulvaney-Stanek. It has been a pleasure serving in this role with you. You have my deepest respect and appreciation. To our Democratic caucus and our leadership teams, Assistant Majority Leaders Representative James, Representative Brown, and Representative Knott, to our chairs and our committee leadership, thank you for the many extra hours you spend supporting our efforts. You are critical to the work we do. To the Speaker's Chief of Staff, Connor Kennedy, and aide to the Speaker, Molly Moore. I don't know how you two put up with us, but you do. And you do it with skill, patience, and a positive attitude, and all with a great sense of humor. Thank you, Connor and Molly. Finally, my last words of appreciation go to our Speaker of the House, Jill Krowinski, who leads us in our work with respect, dignity, and a kind but steady hand. Those are the qualities that command the respect of those around you, and you have more than earned that respect. Thank you for all you do for us and for Vermont. Now, my hope is that all of you will go home and take a few days off. Spend time with your family and friends and get out into the fresh air during this beautiful time in Vermont. It is an honor to serve with all of you, and I look forward to serving once again with all of you in January. Thank you.
Members, we did it. We have reached the final day and the final moments of the legislative session. When we first gathered in this chamber in January, we brought with us a vision for our state. We welcomed a record-breaking number of new members and we reunited with old friends. And since then, we have spent hundreds of hours together, representing the needs of our communities with a shared goal of passing legislation that would move our state forward, making a more equitable and resilient state for all Vermonters. Every year we come to the State House with the privilege and the responsibility of representing our communities. Together, we pass policies that benefit Vermonters in every corner of our state and creates an economy that works for everyone. I am grateful. I am so grateful to each and every one of you for your willingness to serve, the sacrifices that you make that are necessary to be here and arrive with the spirit of collaboration and dedication to do the work before us and do it sometimes with a sense of humor. As we depart from the whirlwind of the past couple weeks, it's easy to forget the little details, the bills we debated, the difficult moments, and the joyous ones. It is the work we came in this chamber to do together, the ideas we shared in committee, the beliefs we brought to the floor that we cannot forget. We continued to work to mitigate the impact of climate change on our state, one of the most significant challenges facing Vermonters and the planet. Our investments to make Vermont more resilient and prepared for the increasing volatile weather impacting our state. We passed critical legislation, including 30 by 30 conservation bill and the Affordable Heat Act, which will get us the necessary data to develop policies that will protect our low-income and most vulnerable Vermonters from the continued economic squeeze of climate change. Over the past 3 years, the House has passed robust workforce and higher education legislation that invested in educational opportunities at our state colleges, at job training to grow careers, grant and tuition forgiveness program for critical careers like nursing and the trades, and grant funding to support our small business community. The $74 million investment in this year's budget includes a new K through 12 Educators Forgivable Loan Program, grant funding for small farms and organic dairy producers, funding for new restorative justice programs at our state colleges, and so much more. Giving Vermonters from all walks of life pathways to succeed is vital to all of us, and I'm proud of the work that we did to accomplish that this year. Members, last year, our nation witnessed the overturning of Roe v. Wade, erasing 50 years of precedent. As some states decided to become more hostile to reproductive and gender-affirming care, we have stood firmly in defense of these rights and passed additional legislation this session to protect Vermonters, those seeking care in our state and those providers to make sure that they had no harm. We must ensure that we continue to be a beacon of hope when it comes to autonomy and freedom to make our own healthcare decisions. We will continue to stay vigilant to address any and all affronts to this fundamental right. This budget, the budget we just passed, includes an incredible package of investments that is essential to services and infrastructure desperately needed in all of our 14 counties. There are $211 million in housing investments, including Housing Assistance and Support Program, continued investment in the Vermont Housing Conservation Board to build affordable housing, transitional housing through justice reinvestment, and so much more. This budget increases the rates for dental services, which will create greater capacity and greater access in dental care. It boosts the reimbursement rate, some as high as 79% for EMS, for primary care, for specialty care, free clinic, nursing home, home health, and other providers. It is impossible to capture all of the work that we did this session in these last remarks, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the tripartisan package of our historic universal childcare bill earlier today. We have worked for years to support family and childcare workers through the passage of numerous childcare initiatives, but this one is monumental legislation that we worked on together to pass. The individuals that care for our Vermont children will get the resources and financial support that they deserve, while families will have increased access to childcare that they can actually afford. I have said it before, and I will continue to say that Vermont can show the rest of the country that there's a way to pass legislation that will truly make a difference for our families and for our economy. Our achievements here and success would not have been possible without the unwavering support of our dedicated staff, the unsung heroes of the State House. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to our staff at the Joint Fiscal Office, Legislative Council, Legislative Operations, Human Resources, IT, Drafting Operations, Committee Assistants, Sergeant at Arms Office, Capitol Police, our custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, our incredible clerk's office staff, and my incredible staff. Connor and Molly, I'm forever grateful for all your incredible support and your magic ability to be everywhere, helping everyone all at once at the same time. It is amazing. All of the staff here, your professionalism, expertise, and unwavering dedication are instrumental to our work. We know the session can be grueling and stressful, but please know that it does not go unnoticed, and we appreciate you all so very much. So I'll start with Representative Mulvaney Stanek. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work and your leadership. I also appreciate having the opportunity to work with another leader on our Burlington charter changes. Working with you has been an honor, and your commitment to collaboration and communication is just so truly appreciated. Thank you so much. Representative McCoy, we share a great and deep commitment to quorum, which I so very much appreciate, and I also appreciate your strong leadership and tireless effort throughout this session. We have faced challenges together and found solutions. Your leadership with humor and patience and respect has made a significant impact in this chamber. Thank you so much for all your hard work. And to Representative Long, thank you for your exceptional leadership, attentive listening, and unwavering determination. Your dedication to ensuring every voice is heard has made a profound difference. Leading a caucus of over 100 members is quite a task, and you have done a wonderful job. I am so proud to serve with you and the fantastic caucus leadership team that we have. Thank you so much. Members, as we reach the halfway mark of this legislative biennium, it's important to remember that our work is far from finished. While we'll gavel out and leave this chamber, the pursuit of our ideas and ideals extends beyond the steps of the State House. Our state continues to be a work in progress, but it is a labor of generations of lawmakers before us that have chosen to continue and to disrupt. Our process is unique. We are a citizen legislature that comes together every January with the task of building a better tomorrow for our families, our friends, neighborhoods, and the generations of Vermonters to come. So as we all return home, I encourage you to take space and time to decompress and reflect on the past 4 months. Together, we have governed with purpose and built a stronger foundation for Vermont, one that moves all 14 Vermont counties forward. Thank you so much. Be well, and we'll see you soon. With that, member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to appoint a committee of 6 to inform the governor that the House has completed its business and is ready to adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion that the Speaker appoint a committee of 6 to inform the governor that the House has completed its business and is ready to adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have directed the Speaker to appoint a committee of 6 to inform the governor that the House has completed its business and is ready to adjourn pursuant to JRS 27. Pursuant to your action, the chair appoints the following members to serve on the committee: the member from Newfane, Representative Long; the member from Poultney, Representative McCoy; the member from Burlington, Representative Mulvaney Stanek; the member from Vergennes, Representative Lamfer; the member from Brattleboro, Representative Kornheiser; and the member from Coventry, Representative Marcotte. We will wait while the committee escorts the governor to the House.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Sergeant at Arms.
would everyone please rise? The Governor of the State of Vermont, the Honorable Philip B. Scott.
Welcome, Governor.
Thank you all. So you can sit down. I know you're in a hurry to get out of here, but I promise it won't take too long. Speaker Kowinski, Leader Long, Leader McCoy, Leader Mulvaney Stanek, Leader Samus, and members of the House. I appreciate being here tonight despite our differences and disagreements, because that's the way government should work. We can negotiate the issues, work towards consensus and compromise, or as it appears to be the case this year, agree to disagree in some areas, all while remaining civil and respectful. When I addressed you at the start of the session, I said, thanks to the billions of dollars in federal aid and the fiscal discipline we've practiced for 3 years leading up to the pandemic, we were in good financial shape and could build our fiscal year 24 budget with hundreds of millions in state surplus. I ask you to work with me to seize the moment in order to change the trajectory of our state, and specifically for communities that have been left far behind for far too long. To me, that meant following through on what we started 2 years ago, focusing on the fundamentals, using these historic one-time stimulus funds to revitalize our county economic centers and the communities that surround them. Investing in basic infrastructure like housing, broadband, roads and bridges, climate resiliency, and the water, sewer, and stormwater systems needed for both clean water and economic growth. At the same time, we propose ideas to address our workforce challenges, including making historic investments in childcare, tax relief for Vermonters who need it most, strengthening downtowns and workforce training and recruitment with a renewed focus on career technical education. Because that's how I think we make Vermont better, by helping families and communities get ahead. And you supported a number of these initiatives. That includes investments to welcome more refugees who then contribute to our workforce and communities. Grants to make it easier for smaller, long-forgotten towns and villages to access federal funds. We expanded important health services to more regions and more Vermonters, including dental care, mental health, substance use treatment, and prevention. And while I truly believe we must do more on Act 250 in order to solve our housing crisis, we did take some steps forward with smart regulatory reforms to build more housing, which we desperately need in many areas of the state. But in January, I also talked about how important it was to consider the impact and the cost of every decision we make on the families and places that need our help most. Because the fact is, for too many years, our regional economic centers like Springfield, Bellows Falls, Bennington, St. Johnsbury, Rutland, Newport, and my hometown of Barrie have been asked to shoulder higher costs and more mandates with fewer people. From my perspective, in order to revitalize communities and welcome more workers across the state, we've got to make Vermont more affordable. With high inflation and the looming economic storm clouds on the horizon, Vermonters are nervous and already stretched stretched too thin. And to be clear, if we're taking money out of one pocket to put it into the other, that's not making anything more affordable. Right now, it appears this is an area where we may disagree. Every single one of your towns elected me and you because they wanted balance and they want sustainable solutions at a price they can afford. And it's not as though we disagree on the goals. It's the how and the pace in which we get there where there's disagreement. I know this isn't what the majority of you want to hear, but I hope we'll take that opportunity to give them that balance when we come back next month. But it's going to take all of us to make that happen. So thank you again for respecting this process. And I want to especially thank all the moms in the chamber for all you do each and every day. And I hope you have a very restful and wonderful Mother's Day on Sunday. So again, I thank you, and thanks for your patience. Thanks for doing all the work you've completed today, and I hope you have a very safe journey home. Thank you.
Will the committee please convene in the well of the House to escort the governor? Members, you may be seated, and we will await the return of the committee before we make our final motion. That was so nice. Great job, people. And with that, member from Newfane, can you please offer us a motion to adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House now adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27.
The member from Newfane moves that the House now adjourn pursuant to the provisions of JRS 27. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and we have adjourned pursuant to the provisions of JRS